I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of the Senate Committee on Finance and Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, Subcommittee on Human Services. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for a little bit of a tardy start. We have a couple members that are presenting in other committees this morning. So at this time, we'll go ahead and start take roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigy. Assemblywoman Monroe-Monreno. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Yeager. Senator Canizaro. Senator Don Daraloop. Senator Severs-Gansert. Senator Titus. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Chair Wynn.
And if we can mark those members present as they arrive, like I said, I believe there are many people presenting in other committees throughout the building this morning. So we've got a very robust agenda for this morning, and we will go ahead and get started with the first agenda item, the budget closing for the Department of Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability Services Division, and I will turn it over to staff to walk us through that closing document.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name's Kimber Ellsworth with the Fiscal Analysis Division. We have 8 budgets with the Aging and Disability Services Division. And I will start with the Regional Centers Overview document, which covers the 3 developmental services regional centers. These provide an array of services provided to people of all ages with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. The decision units that are specific to an individual budget are discussed in the closing documents for that respective regional center budget. This document, beginning on page 3 of your closing packet, covers 4 major closing issues among the 3 regional centers. The first is the caseload adjustments, and this includes decision units M200, M201, and M510. The governor recommends net additional funding of $62.3 million, including $30.5 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to adjust caseloads for caseload growth, reduce wait lists, and adjust associated staffing for the supported living arrangements, family support, and jobs and day training programs at the Desert Regional Center, Sierra Regional Center, and Rural Regional Center. The staffing adjustments included with the caseload projections that were used in the governor's recommended budget included the addition of 17 positions over the biennium. The agency provided updated caseload and waiver waitlist projections that were calculated in March using actual data through February 2023. And there's a table on page 6 that details the projected monthly average caseload and waiver waitlist reductions for the developmental services programs and compares the projections that were used in the executive budget with the March 2023 update. Compared to the projections that were used to prepare the recommendations in the executive budget, the monthly average regional centers developmental services caseloads and waiver waitlists are projected to be higher for each fiscal year in the upcoming biennium. The updated caseloads and waiver waitlist projections result in total funding of $74 million, including $37.5 million general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium, which is a net increase of $11.7 million over the biennium compared to the amount recommended in the executive budget. There's a table on page 8 that summarizes the developmental services service types that are provided. It compares the governor's recommendation and the March 2023 caseload projection by service type. The table on page 9 compares or shows the recommended staffing adjustments that are based on the updated caseload projections. As I mentioned, the governor's recommendation included a net increase of 17 positions. The March caseload update supports a net increase of 20 positions over the biennium, and the table breaks down which regional centers those positions would go to. The decision for the committee is on page 10. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the following to support caseload increases for the developmental services programs, including associated staffing adjustments and waiver waitlist reductions over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections. 3.8 million, including 2.8 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024, and 3.8 million, including 2.8 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2025 in the M200 decision unit, and 6.4 million, including 3.2 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 24, and 12 million, including 6.4 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 25 in the M201 decision unit, and 22.5 million, including 10.3 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 24, and 25.6 million, including 12 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 25 in the M510 decision unit. Fiscal staff also requests authority to make technical adjustments to the caseload decision units as necessary.
And just for clarification, this increase over the governor's recommendation is due to those caseload increases. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, at this time, I'd entertain a motion as recommended by staff.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The second major issue is on page 10. This is the provider rate increase. The governor recommends funding totaling 105.7 million, including 50.7 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to increase the rates paid to providers of intellectual and developmental disability waiver services, including supported living arrangements and jobs and day training services, and this rate is recommended to be effective July 1st, 2023. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency discussed the critical provider staffing shortages and explained that the new rate structure is intended to provide a career path for direct support staff by ensuring base level benefits. The agency clarified the anticipated timeline to implement the rate increases, which are planned in two steps, with an initial increase based on the current rate structure beginning July 1st, 2023 through March 31st, 2024, and the new rate structure in place beginning April 1st, 2024. This would allow time for the agency to implement the new rate structure and enable the agency to provide an immediate rate increase beginning July 1st. There's an attachment on page 15 that summarizes the recommended rate increases. As noted during the budget hearing, the Medicaid budget is recommended to fund the rate increase beginning April 1st, 2024, as opposed to July 1st, 2023. While state amendments for waiver services are not typically eligible for retroactive payments, state Medicaid did indicate that additional pandemic-related flexibility provided by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services may temporarily allow for retroactive approval of waiver amendments. Therefore, fiscal staff is recommending adjustments to the federal Medicaid funding in the Medicaid budget to implement the rate increase beginning July 1st, 2023 to align with the recommendation in this budget. Additionally, the funding allocations in this decision unit are calculated based on the FMAP rates, which were updated in March. And as a result, this adds additional Medicaid revenue of $3.1 million and a corresponding decrease in general fund appropriations as calculated by the department for total funding of $105.7 million over the biennium, including $47.6 million in general fund appropriations. Due to the current provider staffing shortages contributing to waitlist growth and wait times, the subcommittee may wish to recommend a letter of intent be issued to the agency to report on a semi-annual basis to the Interim Finance Committee during the 2023 to 25 biennium on the status of the provider rate increases and associated provider capacity and wait lists for intellectual and developmental disability waiver services, including the number of individuals receiving services, the number of individuals waiting for services, and the average client wait time, a discussion of the effect of the rate increase on provider capacity and the ability to meet service needs and associated concerns and challenges. The decision for the committee is on page 12 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $105.7 million, including $47.6 million general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium, as adjusted to increase the rates paid to providers of intellectual and developmental disability waiver services, with authority for technical adjustments as necessary based on closing recommendations in the Medicaid budget, and to recommend issuing a letter of intent to the agency to report on a semi-annual basis to the Interim Finance Committee during the 2023 to 25 biennium on the status of the rate increases and associated provider capacity and wait lists for intellectual and developmental disabilities waiver services.
Do we have any questions regarding that recommendation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The next major closing issue is on page 12 of your packet. This is for enhanced intensive support services. The governor recommends total funding of $1.9 million, including $1.5 million general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to augment staffing to provide additional support for individuals with high behavioral and complex needs. This includes 2 decision units. Decision Unit M202 adds 9 new positions across the 3 regional centers for the Youth Intensive Support Services Program, including 8 developmental specialist 3 positions to service coordinators and 1 health program manager 3. Decision Unit E255 adds 2 contracted board-certified behavior analysts, 1 at Sierra Regional Center and 1 at Rural Regional Center, to support individuals with high behavioral and complex needs and provide additional expertise in that area. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency noted that developmental services have seen an increase in behavioral health needs, particularly for children with dual diagnosis or co-occurring mental illness and behavioral difficulties or complex medical needs. And these services require more intensive staff time to work with the individuals and their families. The agency indicated that currently 15 individuals with high behavioral and complex needs are receiving institutional care out of state, and it is possible that the additional staffing would allow for these individuals to return to the state for services. The decision for the committee is on page 13. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $1.9 million, including $1.5 million general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund 2 contracted behavior analysts and 9 new positions across the 3 regional centers for the Youth Intensive Support Services Program to support individuals with high behavioral and complex needs with authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Do you have any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. Move on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The 4th major closing issue begins on page 13 of your packet. This is the fiscal intermediary program allotment increase. The governor recommends $469,600, including $330,890 in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to increase the fiscal intermediary program allotment paid to qualified families by $200. This would be a 44.4% increase from the current rate of $450. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the subcommittee asked the agency whether the recommended $200 increase would be sufficient. The agency indicated that the amount was determined based on talks with families. However, in a follow-up, the agency indicated that the rate has not been increased since it was established in 2006, and the recommended increase falls slightly short of what it would take to account for inflation since 2006 when it was established. The agency estimates a monthly allotment of $679, or an increase of $229 over the current rate of $450, which is calculated based on the annual consumer price index increase from 2006 to 2023, would account for inflation to allow families to more adequately purchase services. The additional $29, in addition to what the governor recommends, per family per month would cost an additional $68,092 over the biennium, and this includes $47,979 in general fund appropriations compared to the governor's recommendation.
Thank you. In looking at this, there is going to be a slight deviation, and I'm going to recommend that we approve $258,770, $184,645 of that, which would be in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024, and $278,922, $194,224 of general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2025 to fund a $229 increase to the fiscal intermediary program allotment paid to qualifying families from $450 to $679 per family per month based on the annual consumer price index increases from 2006 to 2023. So this does slightly deviate from the recommendation in your closing packet to account for that inflation. So instead of that $650, it would be $679. So that would be my motion.
I second.
Do we have any further discussion on that amended motion? Oh, never mind. I'm backtracking. Go ahead. I'm recommending that motion.
And I will move to recommend that motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on that motion made by Vice Chair Garlow? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The other closing item is on page 14. Other closing items that are specific to an individual regional center budget are discussed in the closing document for that budget. There is one other closing item here, which is back language in the Appropriations Act. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed as recommended by the governor.
I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. Now we can move on to 3166.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The next budget is on page 19. This is the Family Preservation Program. This provides a monthly cash assistance to low-income families who care for relatives in their homes who have a profound or severe intellectual or developmental disability. The Family Preservation Program is administered by the Sierra Regional Center, but serves clients in all three regional centers. The budget is funded with general fund appropriations, federal temporary assistance for needy families funds, and transfers from the Trust Fund for a Healthy Nevada. There are two major closing issues in this budget. The first is on page 19. This is a recommended funding for caseload adjustments. The governor recommends additional general fund appropriations of $168,300 for the Family Preservation Program to support projected caseload growth over the upcoming biennium. The table on page 20 shows the caseload projections that were used in the governor's recommended budget and compares with the March 2023 updated caseload projections provided by the agency. Compared to the projections that were used to prepare the recommendation in the executive budget, the updated caseload projections are slightly lower in each year for the upcoming biennium. The updated caseload decision units M200 and M201 result in total costs of $103,972 over the 2023 biennium, which is $64,000 approximately less compared to the amounts recommended in the executive budget over the biennium. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 21. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $20,570 in fiscal year 2024 and $83,402 in fiscal year 2025 to fund projected caseload growth for the Family Preservation Program over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections to provide financial assistance of $374 per family per month?
Do you have any further questions regarding this budget presentation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Moving on to the second major issue on page 21 is the allotment increase. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $1.7 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to increase the family preservation program allotment paid to qualified families from $374 to $486 per family per month. And this is a 29.9% increase based on the cumulative average federal SSI cost of living annual percentage increases since the rate was last adjusted in fiscal year 2009. The amount of monthly assistance paid per family for the Family Preservation Program must be established by legislative appropriation for each fiscal year, pursuant to NRS 4353.365. The monthly allotment was increased by the 2007 legislature from $362 per family in fiscal year 2008 to $374 per family in fiscal year 2009, where it has remained. The costs in this decision unit are calculated based on the projected caseload for the upcoming biennium, which I mentioned are lower for each year compared to the amounts in the executive budget. The updated caseload projections result in updated costs of $852,880 in fiscal year 2024 and $871,696 in fiscal year 25 to increase the monthly financial assistance payment to $486, which is approximately $19,000 less over the biennium compared to the amount in the executive budget. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 21. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the general fund appropriations of $852,880 in fiscal year 2024 and $871,696 in fiscal year 2025 as adjusted based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections to fund a 29.9% increase in the Family Preservation Program allotment paid to qualifying families from $374 to $486 per family per month?
Any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. And with that, there are no other closing items in this budget, so we can move on to the Rural Regional Center, which is on page 23 of your packet. The Rural Regional Center is one of 3 regional centers which provides services for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and related conditions living in rural Nevada. The budget is funded primarily with general fund appropriations and federal Medicaid funds. There are 4 major closing issues, and those were covered in the regional center's overview document that we discussed earlier. There are 2 other closing items in this budget. Fiscal staff recommends all other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. And that moves us on to 3279 Desert Regional Center.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The Desert Regional Center begins on page 27 of your packet. This center is one of the 3 regional centers that provide services for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and related conditions residing in southern Nevada. The budget is funded primarily with general fund appropriations and federal Medicaid funds. There are 5 major closing issues in this budget. The first 4 were covered in the overview document. Major issue number 5 is on page 27 of your packet. This is for a new accounting assistant and an unclassified agency manager position. The governor recommends $421,785, including general fund appropriations of $321,737 over the upcoming biennium to fund the 2 new positions and associated costs to support ongoing operational needs at the Desert Regional Center. The accounting assistant 4 is recommended to supervise and manage the agency's Southern Payroll Department, and the agency manager is recommended to manage and operate the Desert Regional Center Intermediate Care Facility. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency discussed how the new accounting assistant 4 is anticipated to reduce the need for overtime associated with the Southern Payroll Department. Additionally, to address staffing needs at the intermediate care facility, the agency indicated it was able to fund the new agency manager position early. The position was filled in February 2023. So fiscal staff included a technical adjustment, as reflected at the end of this closing document, to fund the agency manager position beginning in July 2023 as opposed to October 2023, and to adjust the retirement code to align with the current retirement plan, which increases the costs for the position by approximately $41,000 in fiscal year 2024 and approximately $2,000 in fiscal year 2025. As adjusted, the new agency manager position totals $340,477 over the upcoming biennium. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 28 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $465,307, including $353,990 in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund one new accounting assistant and one unclassified agency manager position and associated costs as adjusted?
Any questions?
So moved.
Second.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Seeing no opposition, motion carries. If we can move on to the next item. See, it's doing it again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. On page 29, there is a table that summarizes the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds that were allocated to this budget over the interim. And this included an allocation of $8.5 million provided to the Grant a Gift Autism Foundation Ackerman Center. The agency previously reported that the project had experienced some delays with ramping up and hiring. However, in response to follow-up questions, the agency indicated that it did anticipate all remaining funds would be obligated in the upcoming biennium. Additionally, the Governor's Finance Office provided revised projections for the project, identifying funding in the upcoming biennium. And as you can see in the table, there was no funding recommended in the executive budget. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to this budget to align the funding projected expenditures consistent with the updated projections provided by the Governor's Finance Office, which were also presented during the closing of the COVID-19 relief program's budget. And this would be consistent with the actions taken by the full committees in closing that budget. On page 30, there's also a summary of the additional $14.5 million in ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds that was allocated over the interim to support intensive behavioral support homes. Again, the Governor's Finance Office provided updated projections to include the funding in fiscal year 2024. So fiscal staff recommends technical adjustments to this budget to align with those projected expenditures. With the noted adjustments, the ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funding in this budget would total $16.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $6.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for both of those projects. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 30 of the closing packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of Federal American Rescue Plan Act coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $16.6 million in fiscal year 24 and $6.4 million in fiscal year 2025 to continue previously approved funding for the Grant a Gift Autism Foundation Ackerman Center and the Intensive Behavioral Support Homes projects based upon updated information provided by the Governor's Finance Office and consistent with actions taken by the full committees in closing the COVID-19 relief program's budgets?
Any questions from committee members? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to thank staff and the Governor's Office for figuring this out and making sure we get this added back in because it's substantial and it helps so many children. Thank you.
Go ahead. Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you very much, and I would concur with my colleague. I've watched this program grow over the years, and this is a really needed reinstatement, so thank you very much.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other closing items are on page 30 of the packet. There are 5 other closing items, including a technical adjustment to add a position back to the base budget that was excluded from the executive budget, and this was approved during the 2021 legislative session. The decision for the, fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 5 be closed with the technical adjustment noted, and requests authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries, and I think that brings us to 3280, the Sierra Regional Center budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The Sierra Regional Center budget begins on page 35 of your packet. The Sierra Regional Center is one of the 3 regional centers that provide services for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and related conditions residing in Washoe County. This budget is funded primarily with general fund appropriations and federal Medicaid funds. There are 4 major closing issues, which were covered in the overview document. There are 5 other closing items on page 35, including a technical adjustment related to the transfer of building costs from the DPPH, Building 8, to support utilities and maintenance costs. Due to an error in the executive budget, there's insufficient general fund from the DPPH to transfer the funding to support these costs, so fiscal staff recommends this be approved as a direct appropriation rather than a transfer from the DPPH budget. And there's no impact to the amount of general fund that's required to support that. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 5 be closed as being funded by direct appropriation to this budget instead of a transfer, and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions from committee? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries, and I think that brings us to our next budget, Home and Community-Based Services, 3266.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The Home and Community-Based Services budget begins on page 39. This budget includes community-based care services, such as the Community Options Program for the elderly, personal assistance services, and the Home and community-based waiver programs for the frail, elderly, and physically disabled, which provides alternatives to nursing home and or long-term care facility placement for individuals at risk of institutionalization. This budget also contains the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, Adult Protective Services, Nutrition and Home-Delivered Meals programs, and Social Services and Family Caregiver Support programs. The budget is funded primarily with general fund appropriations and federal funds. There are 6 major closing issues in this budget. The first begins on page 39, and this is for the community-based care caseload and staffing adjustments. The executive budget recommends total funding of $2.4 million, including $2.1 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support projected caseload and associated staffing adjustments for the community-based care programs. And this includes the personal assistance services and the community options programs for the elderly, as well as the waiver programs. There's a table on page 41 that summarizes the caseload that was used for the governor's recommended budget and the associated costs, and the update based on the March 2023 projections. Compared to the projections that were used to prepare the recommendations in the executive budget, the monthly average personal assistance services and community options program for the elderly caseload projections are slightly higher for each fiscal year in the upcoming biennium. The updated caseloads and waitlist projections result in general fund appropriations of $1.3 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, which is an increase of $207,000 approximately over the biennium compared to the amount in the executive budget. As mentioned, this recommendation also includes staffing adjustments. The governor's recommendation included an increase of 9 positions with the caseload projections that were used in the executive budget. Based on the March 2023 projections, the combined monthly average community-based care caseload, which includes the waiver services, is projected to increase by 18.4% over the biennium. And this is notably higher compared to the projections in the executive budget. This recommendation, or the projections, support an increase of 37 positions over the biennium. And this table on page 42 compares the governor's recommendation based on the previous caseload projections, and then the staffing adjustments based on the March caseload update, and the difference of 28 positions in total. The caseload staffing adjustments based on the updated projections result in additional costs of $5.2 million, including $3.7 million general fund appropriations over the upcoming biennium, which is $3.8 million more compared to the amount in the executive budget. The agency did indicate previously that there is a high vacancy rate, approximately 30% among caseload staff within its community-based care team. The additional staffing recommended in Decision Unit M205, discussed here, through the updated caseload projections, combined with the additional positions discussed in Major Closing Issue 2, would total 87 new positions. Given the current vacancies and potential challenges in the division's ability to hire all the new staff, the subcommittee may wish to consider setting aside the fiscal year 2025 general fund portion of funding, which is $2.3 million, in the restricted contingency account for the added caseload staff, and direct the agency to bring justification to the interim finance committee that the funding is needed, and after demonstrating the ability to fill the 27 new positions that would be added in fiscal year 2024. The decision for the committee is on page 43 of your packet. The subcommittee may wish to consider the following options. Option A, recommend approval of the following to support caseload increases for the community-based care programs over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections. General fund appropriations of $405,204 in fiscal year 2024 and $474,009 in fiscal year 2025 in the M200, M201, and M203 decision units to support caseload growth, and general fund appropriations of $188,053 in fiscal year 2024 and $203,892 in fiscal year 2025 in the M202 and M204 decision units to support waitlist reductions, and $1.9 million, including $1.4 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024, and $3.3 million, including $2.3 million general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2025, in the M205 decision unit to support associated staffing adjustments. Or, option B, given the significant increase in staffing and current challenges in filling positions, recommend approval of the following to support caseload increases for the community-based care programs over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections. General fund appropriations of $405,204 in fiscal year 2024 and $474,009 in fiscal year 2025 in the M200, M201, and M203 decision units to support caseload growth, and general fund appropriations of $188,053 in fiscal year 24 and $203,892 in fiscal year 2025 in the M202 and M204 decision units to support waitlist reductions, and $1.9 million, including $1.4 million general fund appropriations of fiscal year 2024 in the M205 decision unit to support associated staffing adjustments, and recommend that the $2.3 million of general fund appropriations for staffing in fiscal year 2025 be placed as restricted funds in the interim finance committee contingency account, and require the agency to update the committee on its efforts in hiring the 27 new positions funded in fiscal year 2024 in order to demonstrate the need for the funding in fiscal year 2025. Fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments to the caseload decision units as necessary.
Any further discussion? It's my inclination to accept a motion regarding option B, given the significant increase in staffing and the current challenges that we have in filling those positions. But do we have any further questions or discussions before I accept that motion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And I think that brings us to yes, the next major issue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The second major issue is on page 43 of your packet. This is Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program staffing. The governor recommends funding totaling $4.9 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to adjust the staffing for these programs, adding 35 new positions for the Adult Protective Services program and 3 new positions for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program based on caseload. The caseloads were reprojected in March 2023 using February actual data to update these decision units, which are presented on page 45. And I just want to note that the recommended positions for these programs would be transferred out in other closing item 11, consistent with the recommended reorganization to place these positions with the program in the new Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman budget. As I mentioned, the caseload projections table is on page 45. Compared to the projections that were used to prepare the recommendations in the executive budget, the updated caseload projections for fiscal year 25 for Adult Protective Services are slightly lower and notably higher for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program. This results in the addition of 50 positions over the biennium compared to 38 with the recommendation in the executive budget. The table on page 46 compares the staffing included in the governor's recommendation and the staffing that the updated caseload projections would drive, with a difference of 12 positions. The caseload staffing adjustments based on the updated projections result in net additional costs of $6.9 million, including $6.8 million general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium, which is $2 million more over the biennium compared to the amount recommended in the executive budget. As noted, the agency indicated previously that there is a high vacancy rate among caseworkers. The additional staffing recommended in decision units M206 and M207 through the updated caseload projections, again, combined with major issue 1, would total 87 new positions. Given the current vacancies and potential challenges with hiring, the subcommittee may wish to consider setting aside the fiscal year 25 general fund portion of funding, which would be $3.9 million for these positions, and direct the agency to bring justification to the IFC that the funding is needed after demonstrating the ability to fill the 49 new positions that would be added in fiscal year 2024. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 47. The subcommittee may wish to consider the following options. A, recommend approval of the following to support caseload staffing adjustments for the Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman programs over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections. $1.8 million, including $1.8 million general fund appropriations and $15,068 in Title 19 Medicaid administrative claims in fiscal year 2024, and $2.4 million, including $2.4 million general fund appropriations and $21,760 Title 19 Medicaid administrative claims in fiscal year 2025 in the M206 decision unit, and general fund appropriations of $1.1 million in fiscal year 2024 and $1.5 million in fiscal year 2025 in the M207 decision unit. Or option B, given the significant increase in staffing and current challenges in filling positions, recommend approval of the following to support caseload staffing adjustments for the Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman programs over the 2023 to 25 biennium based on March 2023 updated caseload projections. $1.8 million, including $1.8 million general fund appropriations and $15,068 in Title 19 Medicaid administrative claims in fiscal year 2024, and recommend that $2.4 million of general fund appropriations for staffing in fiscal year 2025 in the M206 decision unit be appropriated as restricted funds in the interim Finance Committee contingency account, requiring the agency to update the committee on its efforts in hiring the new positions funded in fiscal year 2024 in order to demonstrate the need for funding in fiscal year 2025, and general fund appropriations of $1.1 million in fiscal year 2024, and recommend that $1.5 million of general fund appropriations for staffing in fiscal year 2025 in the M207 decision unit be appropriated as restricted funds in the interim finance committee contingency account, requiring the agency to update the committee on its efforts in hiring the new positions funded in fiscal year 2024 in order to demonstrate the need for funding in fiscal year 2025. Fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Again, this feels like deja vu. I'm going to make the same recommendation and entertain a motion for option B as located on the closing documents. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. And that brings us to our next major closing item, and I will turn it back over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. Major closing issue 3 is on page 47 of your packet. This is the personal care service provider rate increase. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $2 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to increase the rates paid to Community Options Program for the elderly and personal assistance services providers. The agency indicated during the budget hearing that the rate of $25 per hour was determined in an effort to align with the Medicaid budget, which would also begin a rate increase in beginning January 1st, 2024 for the providers of personal care services. And this is the same provider pool. The costs in this decision unit are calculated based on the projected caseloads, which were reprojected in March. These are slightly higher for each fiscal year, and the updated projections result in service costs totaling $2.1 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, which is $145,000 approximately more over the biennium compared to the amount recommended in the executive budget. And this.
Thank you. And if that brings us to that potential decision for the subcommittee on page 49, we do have an alternative motion that I would like to further discuss. The alternative motion that I would entertain is to move to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to increase the rates paid to community options programs for elderly and personal assistance services providers to that $25 per hour effective January 1, 2024, funded with general fund appropriations of $746,763 in fiscal year 2024 and $1.4 million in fiscal year 2025 as adjusted based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections, and recommend the inclusion of back language in the Appropriations Act requiring providers of personal care services to receive the recommended increase reimbursement rate of $25 per hour, pay a wage to direct care workers not less than $16 per hour, and additionally recommend the approval of one management analyst position and associated expenditures in the home and community-based services budget to review compliance of the minimum wage requirements for personal care services direct care workers, funded with general appropriations of approximately $191,638 over the 2023-2025 biennium. You will see a similar motion when we get to the Medicaid budget as well, but that would be my recommendation as an alternative motion consistent with the increase in the as recommended by the governor. Do we have any further discussion regarding that alternative motion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. We can move on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The fourth major closing issue is on begins on page 48 of the closing packet, and this is the reclassifications for adult protective services social work positions. The governor recommends total funding of $370,211, including $365,696 general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to reclassify adult protective services social workers, which is essentially funding a 1 grade increase, or approximately 5%. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency confirmed that the recommendation is intended to align the adult protective services staff compensation with other protective services positions in the state. The agency explained that the reclassification will help the division compete with other employers and to retain existing staff. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 49 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $370,211, including $365,696 in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund a 1 grade increase by reclassifying 48 adult protective services social worker 2s to social worker 3s and reclassifying 9 social work supervisor 1s to social work supervisor 2s.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd entertain a motion to approve the governor's recommendation as just read by staff.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The fifth major issue begins on page 49 of your packet. This is the continuation of American Rescue Plan Act positions. The governor recommends net additional funding of $1.8 million, including $1.6 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium, to continue funding 11 positions that were established during the interim using various sources of federal American Rescue Plan Act grant funds. The recommendation would replace the funding source for these positions to continue them in the upcoming biennium using a combination of general fund appropriations, federal grants, and Medicaid administrative funds. Included in the positions are 3 unclassified regional coordinators, 1 unclassified agency manager, 3 management analysts, and 4 social services program specialists. And these are summarized in the table on page 50 of your packet. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency explained how it has struggled with internal capacity. Continuing the 11 positions that were established during the interim would help address capacity needs within the division, including quality oversight of sub-grants, fiscal oversight of federal grants, and technical assistance and support to community partners, according to the agency. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 51 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for $1.8 million, including $1.6 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to continue funding for 11 positions that were established during the interim using federal American Rescue Plan Act grant funds?
Any questions regarding that recommendation? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries, and that moves us on to major item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. Major closing item 6 begins on page 51, and this is for a new program officer position. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $162,230 over the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund a new program officer position and associated costs to provide support for guardianship cases. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency indicated that social work staff and supervisors are being pulled away from their regular duties to address guardianship cases. The new program officer position is intended to relieve existing social work staff so they can return to their regular duties in performing investigations and oversight. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 52 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $72,331 in fiscal year 2024 and $89,899 in fiscal year 2025 to fund a new program officer position and associated costs?
Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And we'll move on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The table on page 53 summarizes the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds that were approved during the interim for this budget. And as you can see, included in the governor's recommendation is $2.5 million over the biennium to continue funding for some of the projects. The executive budget does not account for all of the planning, advocacy, and community services unit project funding that is projected to be expended in the upcoming biennium, and this totals $19.8 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium. The agency and the governor's finance office have suggested that the remaining Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds allocations that were approved during the interim for the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services unit in the Home and Community-Based Services budget, which are projected to be expended in the upcoming biennium, totaling $19.6 million in fiscal year 24 and $281,271 in fiscal year 2025 for all of those projects, be accounted for in the new Planning, Advocacy, and Community Grants budget to be consistent with the reorganization discussed in other closing item 11. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to align that funding. With the noted adjustments, the American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds in this budget would be zero in fiscal year 2024 and 2025, and the addition of those funds in the new budget are discussed in the document for the new budget. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 55. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $2.2 million in fiscal year 24 and $281,271 in fiscal year 2025 from the Home and Community-Based Services budget to the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Grants budget, continue previously approved funding for the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services unit projects?
Any questions regarding what was just discussed? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other closing items begin on page 55. There are 11 closing items, including item 11, which addresses the budget reorganization and related technical adjustments. The governor recommends various transfers to group-related activities, including the creation of 3 new budgets, which are discussed later. The table on page 56 summarizes the recommended transfers associated with the budget reorganization. And this includes the addition or the transfer out of the positions included in the M206 and M207 decision units discussed earlier for the Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program caseload staffing. So on page 57, there's discussion about decision unit E902, which is shown in the table to transfer those staffs and those positions, and that was adjusted based on the caseload staffing adjustments and those related decision units. So fiscal staff included technical adjustments at the end of this document to align the caseload staffing based on the March 2023 projections, and that results in the transfer out of 165 total positions from this budget to the Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman budget, and that's discussed later in the packet. The fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 10 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 11 be closed as adjusted, and requests authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Any questions regarding that recommendation? Seeing none, and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And I think that brings us to the end of this budget. And so we are moving on to Planning, Advocacy, and Community Grants, 3278. Go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. Page 61 is the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Grants budget. This is a new budget recommended in the executive budget for the upcoming biennium. The Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services Unit offers programs and supportive services to older adults, people with disabilities, and their caregivers, including nutrition and home-delivered meals, assistive technology, transportation, preventive health, social services, and family caregiver support. The unit administers a variety of federal, state, and discretionary funding sources to support community-based services. And the unit also administers the Nevada 211 program. This budget is primarily funded with general fund appropriations and federal funds, including grants for programs authorized under Title III of the Older Americans Act. The major closing issue is the program transfer from the Home and Community-Based Services budget to this new budget. The table on page 62 summarizes the recommended transfers, and this includes the staff for the existing programs that would be transferred into this new budget account. I would note that the decision unit E801 intended to transfer the associated division cost allocation expenditure and related funding from the Home and Community-Based Services budget. However, that was inadvertently excluded. So staff recommends a technical adjustment to this budget to align the projected expenditure and related funding for the division cost allocation with a corresponding adjustment to the Home and Community-Based Services budget. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 64. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services Unit, including 32 existing positions, from various division budgets to a new standalone budget within the division as adjusted to include the associated division cost allocation and with authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary?
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Brings us to our next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 64, there's a summary of the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds that are included in the executive budget. This includes approximately $5,000 that was allocated for the Churchill Community Hospital Patients in Need project. However, the agency has indicated that all funds have been obligated and all expenditures are anticipated to occur in fiscal year 2025. Accordingly, staff recommends removing that allocation from the budget. However, the agency and the Governor's Finance Office recommended that the remaining Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds allocations that were approved during the interim for the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services Unit in the Home and Community-Based Services budget, totaling $19.8 million, be accounted for and authorized in this budget. The table on page 65 summarizes the recommendation based on the updated information provided by the Governor's Finance Office to incorporate the funding for these projects that were approved during the interim. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to budget for all federal ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds that were allocated and are projected to be expended for the upcoming biennium that were previously approved in the Home and Community-Based Services budget for the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services Unit projects in this new budget to account for total project costs over the upcoming biennium. And this would be consistent with the actions taken by the money committees in closing the COVID-19 relief program's budget. With the noted adjustments, the Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund authority in this budget would total $19.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $281,271 in fiscal year 2025 for all projects. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 66. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $19.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $281,271 in fiscal year 2025 in the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Grants budget to continue previously approved funding in the Home and Community-Based Services budget for the Planning, Advocacy, and Community Services Unit projects? based upon updated information provided by the Governor's Finance Office and consistent with action taken by the Money Committees in closing the COVID-19 relief program's budget.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries, and that brings us to the next budget, which is Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care, 3282.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. This is another new budget recommended in the executive budget. The Adult Protective Services Program receives and investigates statewide reports of abuse, neglect, self-neglect, exploitation, isolation, and abandonment for vulnerable adults. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program provides information about resident rights, quality of care, and quality of life to residents in nursing homes or other long-term care facilities and family members, and receives and investigates complaints on behalf of the residents. This budget is funded primarily with general fund appropriations, transfers from the Trust Fund for a Healthy Nevada, and federal funds. The major issue is the program transfer and new budget. The table on page 68 of your packet summarizes the recommended transfers. As mentioned previously, Decision Unit E902 transfers the associated program staffing, which were updated based on the updated caseload projections. The table on page 69 summarizes all of the personnel that are recommended to be transferred into this budget, including the updated caseload positions, and that totals to 165 positions. This is an increase of 12 additional positions compared to what was originally included in the executive budget. Accordingly, fiscal staff included technical adjustments in the closing document to align the staffing and the associated costs. Additionally, as with the previous budget, Decision Unit E801 intended to transfer the associated division cost allocation expenditures, which were inadvertently excluded from the decision unit. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to this budget to align the projected expenditures and related funding for the division cost allocation with a corresponding adjustment to the home and community-based services budget. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 70. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of the Adult Protective Services and Long-Term Care Ombudsman programs, including 165 positions, as adjusted based on the March 2023 updated caseload projections from the Home and Community-Based Services budget, to a new standalone budget within the division, as adjusted to include the associated division cost allocation, and with authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary?
Any questions or discussion? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries, and that brings us to State Independent Living Council, which I think is our last budget on the Aging and Disability Services Division. So begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimber Ellsworth for the record. The State Independent Living Council budget begins on page 71. This is the final of the three new budgets that are recommended in the executive budget to house existing programs. The Nevada Statewide Independent Living Council provides advocacy and support for independent living services and options designed to empower Nevadans with disabilities to live independently in the community. The council consists of volunteers appointed by the governor and coordinates the development of the state plan for independent living. The council is supported by 2 full-time employees, and the budget is funded primarily with state independent living services grant funds as well as general fund appropriations. The major closing issue is the program transfer and new budget. And the table on page 72 summarizes the recommended transfer, including the 2 existing staff to support the council. During the March 23rd, 2023 budget hearing, the agency explained how the Home and Community-Based Services budget is a significant amount of work to manage currently, and that the transfer out of the statewide Independent Living Council and associated program staff to a new standalone budget would help make the budgets more fiscally manageable. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 72. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of the statewide Independent Living Council, including 2 existing positions, from the Home and Community-Based Services budget to a new standalone budget within the division, with authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. And motion carries. At this time, we are going to take a 2-minute recess to allow for some musical chairs before we begin closing out the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy budgets. So we'll stand in recess. Okay, I will call this meeting back to order. Thank you guys for your patience as we switched out staff and we began the Division of Healthcare Financing Policy, and we have new people up here. So we will start with Budget 3158 and go ahead and begin when you're ready, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record, will begin the closing for the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy with the Medicaid Administration Budget Account 3158. Begins on page 75 and continues on to page 76 of your closing packet. There are 4 major issues within this budget. The first major closing issue is the elimination of the public option. Chapter 695K of Nevada Rise statute requires the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, in consultation with the Commissioner of Insurance and the Department of Business and Industry and the Executive Director of the Silver State Insurance Health Exchange, to design, establish, and operate a health benefit plan known as the public option. Following approval by the 81st Legislature, the Interim Finance Committee, or IFC, approved transfers through the Public Option Trust Fund to support the ongoing implementation and support of the public option. The agency contracted with Manat Health Strategies for technical assistance related to the public option, and preliminary actuarial findings were presented in a public meeting on September 23, 2022, with the final economic analysis and associated actuarial certification available late December 2022. Hearing discussion and post update following the March 2nd, 2023 hearing, the agency indicated it intended to comply with current state law by submitting the required waiver application by January 1, 2024, with or without the availability of dedicated resources. The associated 5 positions with the public option account is noted in the middle of page 77, including a social services chief and support personnel. If the subcommittee wishes to not recommend approval of the elimination of the public option, general fund appropriations totaling $2.2 million over the 23-25 biennium would be required to maintain base expenditures. And fiscal staff notes the agency request budget included a separate budget account to contain all public option expenditures and revenues. If the subcommittee so decides, it may wish to approve a public option standalone budget to improve tracking and transparency. Madam Chair, there is an alternative motion related to this, and with your leave, I will review it now.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Relating to the elimination of the public option decision unit E491, the alternative motion is as follows, which would increase total general fund appropriations to match the agency request budget. The alternative motion is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $3.7 million in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024 and $1.3 million in fiscal year 2025 to continue dedicated support for the implementation and operation of the public option, including retaining 5 positions and associated expenditures in a new standalone budget, and provide authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments necessary to effectuate the transfer of related revenue authority and expenditures in the new budget. Additionally, back language is recommended in the Appropriations Act providing authority for the new public option budget to transfer general fund appropriations between fiscal years of the 23-25 biennium with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee upon the recommendation of the Governor.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I know that within the closing documents on the alternative, it indicated a general fund appropriations totaling $2.2 million over the 23-25 biennium. But in this alternative motion, we are recommending $3.7 million in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024 and $1.3 million in fiscal year 2025. And it's my understanding that those numbers came from the initial agency, recommendations in the fall of 2022. Is that correct? Can I confirm that?
Yes, Madam Chair, absolutely correct.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to make it clear that that number wasn't just made up. It was actually recommended in the previous administration by the agency to be able to go forward with that public option operation and implementation. Do we have any further questions or comments regarding this? And I see one from Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the alternative motion on this particular issue. I did want to address a couple of things. I know we had a discussion on this during the initial budget hearing. Obviously, from the 2021 session, Senate Bill 420, which was a bill that I worked on, appropriated money for the Public Option Trust Fund. That was for support and development of the public option. The Senate Bill 420 required there to be development and procurement for the public option in accordance with and along with those 2026 MCO contracts. We also approved money during the interim finance committee for contractual expenditures and to help create these 5 positions in order to help support the development and design and to also assist with the 1332 waiver process. Senate Bill 420 did require that 1332 waiver to be submitted. So that is current Nevada law. That's something we discussed at the last hearing as well when we had the budget hearing on this. And that waiver is to support actually public option pass-through funds. So federal funding that would come to the state of Nevada should that waiver be approved. And then we can utilize that to help support healthcare here in the state. When those numbers were discussed in September of 2022 from the actuarial analysis that was conducted pursuant to Senate Bill 420. That actuarial analysis, and it's in the closing documents as well, found that the public option program does meet the 4 federal requirements for that 1332 waiver, including affordability, scope of coverage, comprehensiveness, and deficit neutrality. And then in addition to that, it was anticipated that it would be approximately $350 to $470 million that could come to the state of Nevada over the first 5 years, $969 million to up to $1.3 billion over 10 years to come to the state of Nevada in federal funds from these federal subsidies, with the respect to having that waiver submitted and approved. So during the hearing, and I just wanted to make sure there was an important distinction because I think this does make a difference. During the hearing, we specifically confirmed with the agency that a waiver would be submitted pursuant to current Nevada law, which requires that waiver to be submitted by January 1st of 2024. I also asked about still needing to prepare the waiver and then also work on the procurement for the public option. That if we are not approving this money for those positions, then that responsibility does not go away because the law still requires both the procurement along with the MCO contracts and also the development and submittal of the waiver. 2 different things, both have to be done under Nevada law, and that would just mean that our folks in Medicaid are going to not only do whatever the current jobs are that they are doing, but also would have to take on these pieces of it. So this elimination that was proposed in the governor's recommended budget, to me, doesn't comport with everything we have been doing this legislative session to ensure that we are employing sufficient staff in our agencies, that we're giving them the tools to do the jobs that they need to do, and to continue to ask more when we have law that is obligating us to do this, and also positions that exist that need to continue to do this work, to me just doesn't seem like the right direction for this committee and is very counterintuitive to everything else that we've been doing throughout this particular session in terms of state workers and approving all of that. So I wanted to note that piece of it. We also have associated contractual obligations and funding needs to help support all of those services, and that's where I know this additional money had come from the original request back in the fall from the agency. And I obviously have been very intimately involved in working through some of those pieces and talking with the prior administration under Governor Sisolak about what might be coming under this. So I am supportive of that. I also wanted to, just on the heels of the conversation that we had during the budget hearing, because I asked questions about whether they would have to submit the waiver and whether this would just mean that they would be doing that same work that is required with just the people, excuse me, who currently are working in DHHS. And so I reached out to our legal to get some clarification on that, just to make sure that we were all working from the same understanding when it comes to whether or not eliminating this funding in these positions means that now Nevada law eliminates the obligation to not only do the procurement, but also to submit a waiver. And what I received from our legal counsel, and I'll be happy to share this with the committee members as well, but wanted to make a record of it, is that NRS 695K.200, which is where the public option resides, requires the public option to be established and available beginning on January 1st, 2026, and NRS 695K.220 requires the use of a statewide competitive bidding process to solicit and enter into contracts with health carriers or other qualified persons or entities to administer the public option, which process must include the MCOs. There is nothing in the language of the provisions making the requirement to procure and make available the public option contingent on approval of a federal waiver. So DHHS must put out a bid to procure the public option even without a federal waiver. Without a federal waiver, the result would be that DHHS would procure the public option without federal funds for that purpose. And so when determining whether or not we should eliminate this funding in these positions in the budget, or we should support it in a way that the agency would be able to actually not only do the waiver, which they are required to submit, but then also to comply with the procurement provisions. Those two are not contingent upon one another, nor is the submission of a successful waiver contingent, or does that negate the procurement. The procurement will happen regardless, and the waiver has to be submitted regardless. And so by simply eliminating this money in these positions, the only thing we would be doing is saying we are going to say no to federal funds of anywhere between 350 to potentially, over the first 5 years, to potentially $1 billion over the next 10 years. So we will do this without those federal funds or the ability to get those funds, and we will still have to go out to procurement, and all of that will be done by just folks who are currently working in Medicaid. So for me, it's not acceptable for us to say that we would eliminate this, because it is just going to put more burdensome work on our agencies, and deny the state access to federal funds, when under the law, irrespective of whether we approve this particular funding mechanism, the waiver must still be submitted, and the procurement also, separately from the waiver, still must go forward with those MCO contracts in 2026. Why we would not give the tools and the resources necessary to effectuate that and just say, hey, DHHS, go ahead and figure out how to do this. We're not going to give you the support to do that, doesn't make sense to me. And again, that is current Nevada law. So I would be very supportive of the alternative motion to give them the resources that they believe are necessary in order to implement this, and so that we can attempt to take advantage of those federal funds as well.
Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be supporting the motion, and I think we all agree that we want to make sure that Nevadans have access to care, and we have a robust exchange system that's been really successful, and Medicaid program where our numbers were increased significantly during the pandemic, and we originally thought those were going to drop off, but it looks like they're going to be staying pretty high, and we've worked really hard to increase the funds that are in Medicaid, because we do get a substantial amount from the federal government, so that seems like the really smart way for us to go. When you look at the plan itself, why we are looking at waivers, the pressure that it puts on the market as far as rates, if you look at least one other state, I think it was Colorado, that implemented a public option, you don't have insurance plans participating because the pressure on the rates and the required cuts are too significant. So the broader concern is whether we will lose providers because they won't be reimbursed at the rates that are acceptable, that cover their costs, and also facilities. So hospitals and urgent care centers, our safety net. Again, we have these two robust programs. We want to make sure we have access to care, but the way that the public option is designed, it's going to cause a decrease or rate cuts within the dollars that are spent towards those care, that care through facilities and providers, and so therefore I'll be opposing this motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? And if I can have staff go ahead and restate that alternative motion as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal. For the record, the alternative motion for the Public Option Decision Unit E491 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of $3.7 million in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024 and $1.3 million in fiscal year 25 to continue dedicated support for the implementation and operation of the public option, including retaining 5 positions and associated expenditures in a new standalone budget, and provide authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments necessary to effectuate the transfer of related revenue authority and expenditures to the new budget. Additionally, back language is recommended in the Appropriations Act providing authority for the new public option budget to transfer general fund appropriations between fiscal years of the 23-25 biennium with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee upon the recommendation of the Governor.
Thank you. At this time, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to accept the alternative motion as read by staff.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. And can I have you go ahead and raise your hands? So we have Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblyman Hafen, Senator Titus, and Senator Severs-Gansert, all nays. But the motion carries. And if we can move on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second major issue for the Healthcare Financing and Policy Administration budget begins on page 78. The governor recommends $3.8 million and $1.9 million in general fund over the 23-25 biennium to fund preparatory activities to establish a statewide managed care organization program, including 2 permanent positions and associated expenditures. Senate Bill 420, also passed during the 81st Legislature, to the extent funding is available, requires the establishment of the statewide managed care program, excluding eligibility groups, including the medical assistance to the age, blind, and disabled, or MAVID group. According to the agency, expanding the managed care organization program statewide would require additional position system updates and funding for contractual expenditures, including 2 new positions and $3.4 million in contractual expenditures. A timeline at the top of page 79 indicates that this program is anticipated to go live January 2026. Fiscal staff notes that this required funding would support preparatory activities associated with the expansion, and the agency indicated no changes to the current delivery model structure during the upcoming 23 to 25 biennium. Regarding the table at the bottom of page 79, fiscal staff notes the first 2 years increase, projected general fund increase due to the claims lag tail associated with fee-for-service claims that would need to continue to get paid out as prospective managed care organization claims would also get paid. During the March 2nd, 2023 hearing, continuing to page 80 of your packet, the agency indicated challenges related to the implementation of a statewide managed care program include the creation of new managed care contracts, ensuring network adequacy. In response to the network adequacy concerns, the agency noted the expansion of telehealth services may otherwise assist in areas where providers may not otherwise be available. The agency confirmed excluded population would include the MABID population as well as children in public care. Fiscal staff notes the recommendation, if approved, would not include the approval of a statewide managed care organization program, but contractual and personnel funding to begin preparatory activities with the intention to support a recommendation to implement a statewide managed care organization program for review and consideration by the 2025 legislature. Decision at the middle of page 80 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of $3.8 million, including $1.9 million general fund, over the 23-25 biennium to fund preparatory activities related to implementation of a statewide managed care organization program for certain Medicaid populations, including 2 new permanent positions and associated expenditures.
Do we have any questions regarding that? If not, at this time I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next major closing issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. The third major closing issue within the Medicaid administration budget account are personnel changes. Fiscal staff note this includes 7 decision units in 6 sections, so I'll do my best to run through each one of these in part. These include, first, the addition of hospital provider tax support positions, which are 4 new permanent positions recommended by the governor to support the implementation of a new private hospital provider tax. This will be discussed more in Budget Account 3177 later in the closing this morning. Second, our third-party liability support positions, which includes 1 new management analyst position to support third-party liability activities. Third is a fair hearing support position, which would be 1 new social services program specialist and associated expenditures to support the fair hearing program. Fiscal staff notes the agency indicated there's a requirement to represent the division at all administrative law fair hearings. Fourth is American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds funded positions. There's 1 decision unit that removes all 18 positions recommended in the base budget and a second decision unit that recommends the continuation of 7 of these 18 positions to fund administrative and related fiscal activities. Next, in the middle of page 82, are tenancy support positions, Decision Unit E357, that would support one social services program specialist and one healthcare coordinator position for tenancy support services. These were approved in the 80th Legislature. However, the agency has indicated difficulty in implementing this program and determining the appropriate federal waiver authority. The agency notes they're working with the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to obtain approvals for both managed care and fee-for-service components of the tenancy support. Fiscal staff notes no tenancy support services were provided over the biennium. However, the agency has indicated that the budget as recommended by the governor would be sufficient to support these services over the coming biennium. Next are certified community behavioral health center support positions, also discussed in the Medicaid administration budget. These are CCBHCs. This includes one management analyst and one social services program specialist position beginning in October 23 to support the expansion of the CCBHC program. Quickly touching on the updates on page 83, fiscal staff notes that the agency requested an additional position in sub-item A to support the hospital provider tax program. This would include one additional management analyst position. This recommendation appears reasonable to both fiscal staff and the governor's finance office. And this includes recommended technical adjustments to adjust the administrative transfer from the 3177, the increased health care quality budget, to the Medicaid administration budget for these purposes. There's also updates to Fair Hearing, American Rescue Plan Act, and tenancy support services on page 83. Madam Chair, there is an additional alternative motion that I'd like to briefly discuss with your approval relating to this major closing issue.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. The alternative motion includes all of the previous items discussed largely unchanged and adds $549,924 with a 50% component for general fund over the biennium to add one unclassified agency manager position to support compliance activities and one social services manager position to support behavioral health activities. According to the agency, these positions would help with administrative activities related to these functional program areas. Madam Chair, if there's any questions, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I can read what is a very long motion.
Any other questions or concerns regarding this? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm going to support the alternative motion. I just appreciate all the hard work of our staff, and I know we've got some substantial increases in personnel and that they're going to need more folks to be able to manage and work on the issues before them. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I will have staff read that alternative motion in whole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The alternative motion reads, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the following options? A, Decision Unit E125 is $982,544 in federal and private hospital provider tax revenue over the 23-25 biennium to support 5 new positions and associated expenditures beginning October 2023, including one additional management analyst position requested by the agency to support the implementation of the private hospital provider tax program, and the noted technical adjustment to replace general fund appropriations with private hospital provider tax revenue, contingent upon approval of the associated major closing issue in the improved healthcare quality and access budget. Item B is Decision Unit E128, $178,615 or $89,308 general fund dollars over the 23-25 biennium to fund one new management analyst position and associated expenditures beginning October 23 to oversee the third-party liability program. Option sub-item C is Decision Unit E131, $179,519, $89,760 in general fund appropriations over the 23-25 biennium to fund one new social services program specialist position and associated expenditures beginning October 23 to support the Fair Hearing program. Item D includes decision units E248 and E490, which is a net $2.1 million reduction in federal American Rescue Plan Act coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds over the 23-25 biennium to eliminate 18 positions and support 7 positions and associated expenditures to provide fiscal and programmatic support beginning July 2023, with authority to make technical adjustments consistent with the decision to be made in the following coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund section. Item E is decision unit E357, which is $356,552, $178,276 of which is general fund appropriations over the 23-25 biennium to fund one social services program specialist position, one healthcare coordinator position, and associated expenditures beginning October 23 to support the implementation of tenancy support services. Next is IFF Decision Unit E370, $445,601, of which $222,801 are general fund appropriations over the 23-25 biennium to fund one management analyst position, one social services program specialist position, and associated expenditures beginning October 23 to support the recommended expansion of the Certified Community Behavioral Health Center program contingent upon approval of the associated service expansion in major closing issue 6 within the Medicaid budget. And finally, G is $549,924, of which $274,962 are general fund over the 23-25 biennium to fund one unclassified agency manager position to support compliance activities, one social services manager position to support behavioral health initiatives and associated expenditures beginning October 23 in the Medicaid administration budget.
Thank you. That was a lot. At this time, any other further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the alternative motion as read by fiscal staff.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. If we can move on to the next major closing item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Moving on to the all-payer claims database, major closing issue 4 within the Medicaid administration budget. The governor recommends $5 million, including $2.8 million in general fund appropriations over the coming biennium, including one business process analyst position to support implementation and ongoing expenditures of the all-payer claims database. Pursuant to SB 40 of the prior session, an all-payer claims database would consolidate information related to health insurance claims resulting from medical, dental, or pharmacy benefits provided in the state. The agency indicates the request for proposal is anticipated to be released by the end of February and provided an update that it was recently released, and a vendor procured by the end of fiscal year 23. Following updates provided by the agency following the March 2nd, 2023 hearing, the agency confirmed the anticipated implementation date of January 24, as long as initial implementation cost of $2.6 million, ongoing cost of $2.2 million, consistent with the budget as recommended by the governor. The motion at the bottom of page 85 asks, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $5 million, $2.8 million in general fund over the 23-25 biennium, including one business process analyst position and associated expenditures to support implementation and ongoing costs of an all-payer claims database?
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All those, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds. Go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to page 86 of your closing packet includes updated agency projections related to coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds. All of the updated projections are reflected in the right-hand side of that table, noted as adjusted, and includes total authorized funds of $12.5 million in 24 and $5.9 million in fiscal year 25. Fiscal staff notes this includes the removal of $10 million related to a transfer to support a medical school at Roseman University. However, the agency indicated updated projections noted these funds would be transferred in fiscal year 23 and no authority would be required over the 24-25 biennium. The agency also provided updated expenditure projections for several other American Rescue Plan Act projects as noted on the table. Motion at the top of page 87 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of American Rescue Plan Act coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds within the base budget totaling $12.5 million in fiscal year 24 and $5.9 million in 25, including revisions to remove authority related to the transfer of funding to Roseman University to support a medical school, as well as updated agency projections.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to our next major closing issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're moving on to other closing items within the administration budget. There are 26, and I'm certainly not going to run through all of them, but I will bring the subcommittee's attention to other closing item 21 at the bottom of page 88 is decision unit E351, includes technical adjustments to update required appropriations and authorizations based on agency projected updates. Other item closing Other closing item 22, Decision Unit E354, as previously noted, includes fiscal staff recommendations to not approve Decision Unit E354 and the associated budget amendment A23-152-3158. This includes updates to the transfer of administrative funds from the 3177 Improve Healthcare Quality and Access budget to the Medicaid administration budget to support activities related to the private hospital provider program. While these decision units are recommended to not be approved, sufficient funding will remain to be transferred to the Medicaid administration budget, and these adjustments appear reasonable. Other closing item number 23 includes base budget adjustments to add and remove positions based on updates from IFC, as well as the removal of duplicated positions in base. Other closing items 24 and 25 include budget amendment A23-111-3158, which appears reasonable to fiscal staff. Other closing item 25 includes budget amendment A23-148-3158, which also appears reasonable. And other closing item 26, including transfer decision units, are recommended to be approved consistent with the recommendation made within the focus and the MFP budget. This is also an item, Madam Chair, where I have a alternative motion, which I'm happy to run through with your approval.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you. The addition as recommended by the chair would include the addition of $1 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium for dedicated waiver support, comprised of $500,000 in general fund appropriations and $500,000 in matching Title 19 federal funds, again, for dedicated waiver support. While the agency has not identified specific positions that would be used to support this additional motion, fiscal staff recommends the addition of this funds in a special use category to be used either for contractual relations, again, dedicated to waiver support, and it is made with the anticipation that the agency would come to a subsequent meeting of the Interim Finance Committee and request the establishment of new positions, again, related to their needs for dedicated waiver support. Happy to address any questions and concerns. Otherwise, I can read the motion in its entirety.
Any questions? This is another position that I asked staff to consider recommending, especially on this waiver support issues, just as there's so many federal funds that we could potentially draw down on, and we just need to be able to apply for these. And I know we don't have staff and they're already overworked. So that was my intention in adding this alternative motion. But I see Senator Severs-Gansert also has some questions or comments. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support this motion. We all know the waivers are a pathway for us to receive more federal dollars and therefore provide greater access to care in Nevada. So I'm thankful to both chairs for looking into this and making this proposal to make sure we've got the staff to kind of keep track of this, because it's a constantly moving issue where we are sort of chasing programs that potentially we can have, but we don't necessarily have the staff to go through the process for the waiver. So thank you for proposing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions regarding the alternative motion? At this point, I will ask fiscal staff to read that alternative motion for consideration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The alternative motion reads, does the subcommittee wish to approve other closing items 1 through 20 as recommended by the governor, other closing item 21 with the technical adjustments noted, other closing item 22, including decision unit E354 and budget amendment A23-152-3158, not to be approved, other closing item 23, closed with the noted technical adjustments, other closing item 24, including budget amendment A23-111-3158, other closing item 25, including budget amendment A23-148-3158, other closing item 26, consistent with the closing recommendation made in the focus and MFP budget, and fiscal staff request authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Additionally, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $500,000 in general fund appropriations and $500,000 in matching federal Title 19 funds each year of the 23-25 biennium for ongoing dedicated waiver support in a special use category, with the intent that the agency will review its needs regarding waiver development and support and return to the Interim Finance Committee with a request to establish new permanent positions from this appropriation. Any funds not used to support permanent positions are to be used for contracted waiver support.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to recommend the alternative motion as read by, or alternative recommendation as read by fiscal staff.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to, where are we on the next? Yes, that brings us to Nevada Medicaid and Title, what is this? 19, sorry, 3243. Go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Within the Nevada Medicaid budget account 3243, there are 8 major closing issues. The first major closing issue relates to Medicaid caseload. The governor recommends funding totaling $453.8 million, of which 76.5 is general fund in 24, and 384 approximately, and 64.4 million in general fund in fiscal year 25 to support projected changes in Medicaid caseload. I'm going to skip to the update on page 97 that includes all of the caseload and update, FMAP updates as recommended by the agency through our standard caseload update process. The table at the top of page 97 shows the variance between what is recommended through the updated caseload as well as what is originally recommended by the governor. In fiscal year 24, it's functionally flat with a 0.1% increase in caseload. Fiscal year 25 is down slightly at a 1.4% decrease relative to the governor's recommended budget. The table at the bottom of page 97 includes the totals for the decision units M200 and 201, which are the caseload decision units, as recommended by the governor, and the update. The fiscal staff also notes these calendar 23 rates include a bonus payment to managed care organizations. However, there's no indication that this bonus payment will continue. The decreases, as included in the caseload updates, are primarily related to the caseload updates discussed previously and decreased calendar year 23 managed care rates based on actual rates. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 98 asks, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of updated caseload projections for the Medicaid program based on March 2023 caseload projections totaling $348.8 million, of which $51.2 million is general fund in fiscal year 24 and $199.9 million or $38.4 million in general fund in fiscal year 25.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries, and we'll move on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving to waiver caseloads, major closing issue 2 within the Medicaid budget, beginning on page 98. The governor recommends $19.9 million, $1.4 million in general fund in 24, and $26.2 million, of which $3.1 million is general fund in fiscal year 25, for increased medical services associated with expanding the number of waiver slots. As discussed in the prior closing for the Aging and Disability Services Division, and as shown at the table at the top of page 99, slots for standard caseload growth, as well as slots for to reduce the wait list to everyone waiting more than 90 days, has increased significantly from the governor's recommended budget, largely based on some issues with the original governor's recommended budget, has been updated, and all of the figures as presented on page 99 reflect the updated caseload figures. After caseload and FMAP adjustments, waiver caseload increases by a total of $35.4 million, of which 4.7 is general fund in 24, and 44.2 million, of which 6.3 is general fund in fiscal year 25. Fiscal staff notes this major closing issue should be closed consistent with the actions taken during the closing of the regional Aging and Disability Services Division budgets earlier. The motion at the top of page 100 reads, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of waiver slot increase based on March 2023 caseload projections, totaling $35.4 million, of $4.7 million in general fund in 24 and $44.2 million, of which 6.3 is general fund in fiscal year 25, consistent with the closing actions taken during the closing of the regional center budgets within the Aging and Disability Services Division.
Any questions regarding? No? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Great, moving on. Motion carries. Moving on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving to major closing issue 3 is the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage Rate, or FMAP. I'm going to skip to page 101, which includes the updates. Every year around March or April, the Federal Funds Information for States system puts out a projected update for federal fiscal year, in this case 25, FMAP rates. The adjustment noted at the table on page 101 indicates a 0.82% reduction in standard FMAP and a 0.57% reduction in the checkup enhanced FMAP. These, albeit small, variations have material impacts on the total general fund budget, as estimated by fiscal staff of approximately $19.2 million in 25 that is reflected in the updated caseload and FMAP components within each individual decision unit within this budget. The decision for the subcommittee at bottom of page 101 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of federal medical assistance percentage rates as reflected in the April 2023 federal funds informations for state update.
Any questions or concerns? Comments? Nothing? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries, and we'll move on to the next major closing issue. And I will just give the committee a heads up. There is a lengthy, I've directed staff to propose a lengthy change to some of the recommendations on here. So just to give everyone a heads up, pay attention. Go ahead and we begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Major closing issue 4 relates to provider reimbursement rate increases on page 102 of your packet. This major closing issue is divided into mandatory as well as discretionary rate increases. I'm going to also move to the update section on page 105 of your packet, which includes, as previously discussed, updated FMAP components for the mandatory rate increase in M101. Based on those March 23 caseload projections and FMAP rate changes, and based on Moody's Analytics March 23 inflation rate projections, the M101 decision unit is recommended to decrease from $527.1 million to $189 million over the biennium. This is a not insignificant reduction, again, primarily due to decreased managed care organization rates in calendar year 2023. Discretionary rate increases are broken into 4 buckets of distinct methodologies used by the governor to recommend rate increases. The first of which, item A, includes a 5% rate increase to physicians, dentists, and skilled nursing facilities. Fiscal staff notes there's a recommended technical adjustment on Decision Unit E374 as recommended by the agency to include updates for all relevant skilled nursing facility provider types to include standard ventilator and pediatric rates. Along with FMAP updates, the total recommended for these decision units is $74.8 million, of which $20.6 million is general fund. The decision unit sub B, which is E126, relates to personal care services. As recommended by the governor, would increase rates to $25 per hour, and as adjusted by fiscal staff based on updated caseload and FMAP rates, would total $79 million or $25.5 million general fund over the biennium. During the subcommittee hearing on March 2nd, 2023, there was discussion relating to the ability to pass through wages to the direct care staff of personal care services. According to information provided by the agency, at least 22 states have some form of wage pass-through, which consists primarily of the establishment of a minimum wage, a percentage of reimbursement rate increase, or through a dedicated trust fund assessment. Fiscal staff notes the Home Care Employment Standards Boards recommended a $25 hourly rate along with a $15 minimum rate to be paid to direct care workers. If the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of associated components in the Medicaid budget, it may wish to direct fiscal staff to include back language in the Appropriations Act requiring providers to compensate direct care workers at a rate not less than $15 per hour. The back language would establish a statutory requirement. However, there are currently no resources within the Medicaid budget to review or enforce compliance for such an edict. The agency recommended the addition of 2 management analyst positions to review compliance, which is also available in the motion for the consideration by the subcommittee, totaling approximately $332,000, of which half, $166,000, would be general fund. Sub-item C are providers to services with individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Fiscal staff notes, as was presented earlier in the Aging and Disability Services Division, there's a technical adjustment recommended to increase federal authorization in fiscal year 24 by $21.7 million to align the start dates of this program in July 1, 2023 to align with the Aging and Disability Services Division. Finally, option D is advanced practice registered nurses are recommended by the governor along with FMAP rate updates to total $34.5 million to increase rates for this provider group to equal that of physicians. Relating to the alternative motion, there are 4 components within the decision units as described that are recommended by the chair for consideration. The alternative motion would increase the rate for skilled nursing facilities from 5% to 10%. It would increase the minimum wage pass-through for direct care workers of personal care service agencies required from $15 to $16 per hour. It would provide for increases for the frail elderly providers, which primarily consists of case management, homemaker services, chore services, and respite for this population that meet a certain level of care, along with increases to home health provider rates, including private duty nurses, by 15%. Madam Chair, happy to address any questions, and when you're ready, we'll read through the entirety of this lengthy motion.
Thank you. And just for a point of clarification, my intent on increasing, obviously, we heard throughout the last couple of months, we've heard from our skilled nursing facilities. I know that with the ending of the public health emergency, the COVID public health emergency, that they were going to be hit disproportionately. So with some changes to some of those FMAP dollars and directing, and you'll see that later on as well, there'll be a potential increase in their reimbursement there, as well as recommending from this 5 to 10% increase. With the limited 5% increase, which I know that they were grateful from, I think they had testified in public comment multiple times about that, it still would only bring them to just the status quo, and it didn't have the intended effect that I believe the governor intended to do, which was to increase those reimbursement rates by 5%. So by adding this 10%, we are in fact doing, I think, what the ultimate intention was by giving that increase. In addition, there were some people that were being eliminated, and that was the increases for the frail elderly providers as well as the private duty nurses. And the significant portion of the recommended alternative motion would add those funds back in there, and I will have staff read through that. Additionally, we had voted unanimously in the Aging and Disability Services Division to increase that pass-through minimum wage from 15 to 16, and this is just consistent what we did with the other home health care providers in that other budget. And so that would be those recommendations. And I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if you would like me to have staff read the entirety of the alternative motion before we have any further discussion on it. And seeing no one here, I will go ahead and have fiscal staff read that alternative recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The alternative motion is as follows. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the following rate increases as recommended by the governor, including recommended technical adjustments reflecting the updated FMAP rate over the 23-25 biennium? Decision Unit M101 is $189 million, including $80.6 million in general fund to fund mandatory rate increases. Decision Unit this is sub A1. Decision Unit E125 is $55.1 million, of which $15.2 million is general fund to fund a 5% rate increase to physicians. Decision A2 is Decision Unit E127 is $7 million, including $2.3 million in general fund to provide a 5% rate increase to dentists. Decision A3 is Decision Unit E374 is an updated $25.3 million, including $6.1 million in general fund to provide a 10% rate increase for skilled nursing facilities, including the noted technical adjustment. Item B includes Decision Unit E126 is $79 million, including $25.9 million general fund to increase personal care services to $25 an hour. Decision C is Decision Unit E371 is $56.7 million in federal Title 19 Medicaid funding to increase rates to providers of services to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including noted technical adjustments to correct the start date to July 2023, contingent upon approval of companion decision units within the Aging and Disability Services Division budget. Item D is Decision Unit E373 is $34.5 million, including $10.2 million general fund to provide for rate increases for advanced practice registered nurses to equal the rates paid to physicians. If item B is recommended for approval, the subcommittee may wish to recommend inclusion of back language in the Appropriations Act requiring providers of personal care services that receive the recommended increased reimbursement rate of $25 per hour to pay a wage to direct care staff workers not less than $16 per hour. Additionally, the subcommittee may wish to recommend approval of 2 management analyst positions and associated expenditures in the Medicaid administration budget to review compliance with the minimum wage requirement for personal care services, direct care workers totaling $333,737, of which $166,869 is general fund over the 23-25 biennium. Additionally, the subcommittee may wish to recommend approval of $11.4 million, including $2.8 million in general fund and $1.6 million in county funds over the 23-25 biennium to fund an average rate increase of approximately 51% for frail elderly provider type 57, which are residential facility for groups providers, and approximately 98% for frail elderly provider type 59, which is assisted living facility providers, to align with the median provider reported costs. Additionally, the subcommittee may wish to recommend $6.7 million, of which $2.2 million is general fund, $88,817,000 are county funds over the 23-25 biennium to provide for a 15% rate increase for home health providers, which is provider type 29, including private duty nurses beginning January 1, 2024.
And with that, I would entertain a motion based on the alternative recommendation as read by fiscal staff.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion? I see it Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support this motion. I appreciate the work that was done to dive deep into some of these budgets where there was not, either we were short on the recommendation or we missed a recommendation as far as the rate changes, particularly for the elderly and the frail. Right now, some of the providers only get $23 a day, and this will be a significant increase so we can make sure that they can take care of those most vulnerable folks. And again, appreciate the chair diving into this and then staff working over the weekend to look at this to make sure that it was something exactly what it would cost so that we could move forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? And I will say, I'm very grateful to staff to be able to do this. As you can see, some of these increases are approximately 51% for frail elderly provider type 57, as well as a 98% increase for frail elderly provider type 59. Obviously, we need these individuals to be able to provide these services to our most vulnerable in society. And I appreciate staff working on making this happen. So any further discussion on the matter? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. And if we can move on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Moving on to applied behavior analysis rates. Major closing issue number 5 on the Medicaid administration budget, beginning on page 108. The governor recommends a net decrease totaling $4.1 million, of which $1.6 million is general fund decrease over the biennium, for a net decrease in rates for applied behavior analysis services. Nevada Revised Statutes Chapter 422 requires the director of the Department of Health and Human Services to, among other things, biennially establish rates for ABA services or applied behavior analysis comparable to rates of reimbursements paid by Medicaid programs in other states. These recommendations by the governor resulted in decreases as shown in the middle of page 108 of your closing document, ranging from functionally flat to a 27 approximate rate decrease for BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysts. During the subcommittee hearing on March 2nd, 2023, the subcommittee indicated interest in isolating the impact related to only ABA services that were recommended to increase. According to the agency, the fiscal impact to approve only rate increases, making no changes to rates recommended to decrease, would total $419,677, or approximately $161,000 in general fund over the biennium. This analysis is included in the table at the middle of page 109, showing the net difference between not approving the governor's recommended decrease of 4.1 approximately million and the alternative scenario provided increasing by 419,000. As previously mentioned, NRS Chapter 422 requires the director to biennially establish rates that are comparable to other states. This alternative scenario presented would result in some rates not being comparable and would conflict with statute. If the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of the alternative scenario, where no rates are recommended to decrease, fiscal staff recommends the inclusion of back language requiring the director of the Department of Health and Human Services to increase rates as approved in this major closing issue, notwithstanding other statutory provisions. The motion at the top of page 110 asks the decision for the subcommittee, option A, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of rate changes for applied behavior analysis services to align rates with rates in other states pursuant to NRS Chapter 422, Sub 27497, totaling an adjusted $4.2 million reduction, including a $1.6 million general fund reduction over the 23-25 biennium beginning April 2024. as recommended by the governor, including decreases to some ABA services rates. Or option B is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $419,677, of which $161,166 is general fund, over the 23-25 biennium to support changes to only those applied behavior analysis rates recommended to increase relative to the median rates of comparable states beginning July 2023 to align with statute. Under this option, no rates for applied behavior analysis services would be decreased, and rates that are currently lower than other states would be increased. If option B is recommended for approval, fiscal staff recommends inclusion of back language in the Appropriations Act requiring the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services to increase rates as recommended in the Medicaid budget, notwithstanding NRS Chapter 422.
Wonderful. I think any questions or comments on this? It's my inclination to recommend option number B on the closing documents on page 110. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion? Senator Severs-Gansert?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've made so much progress for children with autism by increasing the rates over the years for applied behavioral analysis. And so I'm very pleased to see this motion because I don't want us to move backwards. These children and family depend on these services. And I'm grateful again to the chair and to our staff for bringing this to our attention. And I support B. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further discussion or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Moving to other major closing issue. Number 6 relates to service expansions, as recommended by the governor, including $28.6 million, 5.5 of which is general fund over the biennium, to expand covered services related to wearable cardiovascular defibrillators, the provision of dental services to individuals with an intellectual or developmental disability, and to expand the number of certified community behavioral health centers, CCBHCs, from 9 to 15. Looking at the table at the bottom of page 110 includes all of the impacted patient counts as well as expenditures related to these 3 enhancements. Skipping to the update on page 112, during the March 2nd, 2023 hearing, questions were posed relating to dental services, and the agency indicated the maximum benefit would be increased to $2,500 per participant. Additionally, regarding the expansion of the CCBHC program, the agency indicated a larger network of providers would assist with the provision of follow-up care for those who require crisis stabilization services, and includes the tracking of approximately 39 related quality measures, including updated FMAP rates, as is typical following caseload projection FMAP updates in March of 2023. Total expenditures related to service expansions total $27.9 million, including $5.4 million in general fund, as detailed at the bottom of page 112. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 113 asks, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the following service expansions, including FMAP updates as recommended by the governor? Item A is $11,777, $2,348 in general fund over the 23 biennium to fund expanded coverage for wearable cardiac defibrillators. Item B is $10.1 million, including $1.6 million in general fund over the 23-25 biennium to fund expanded coverage for dental services provided to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities aged 21 and over. And item C is $17.8 million, including $3.9 million in general fund over the 23-25 biennium to fund an expansion of the Certified Community Behavioral Health Center program from 9 to 15 providers.
Any questions or comments regarding that recommendation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? I'm sorry, Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, this is another motion I'm very supportive of, especially when you look at the Certified Community Behavioral Health Centers and the governor's proposal to expand those. I think that's very important given the demands that we have across our state. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next major closing issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other major closing issue, I'll get it right one of these times. Number 7 is neurotherapy and biofeedback service elimination. As recommended by the governor, includes budget reductions totaling $7.1 million, including $2.4 million in general fund reductions over the biennium to eliminate neurotherapy and biofeedback services as covered Medicaid services. Neurotherapy and biofeedback were previously approved for elimination as Medicaid covered services by the 81st Legislature as part of budget reduction measures. During and following the March 2nd, 2023 budget hearing update, the agency indicated other Medicaid services would remain available to those who are currently receiving biofeedback and neurotherapy services. The recommended elimination does not limit a patient from receiving psychotherapy services in an outpatient setting, and no impact to access to psychotherapy services is anticipated. Recommended adjustments due to FMAP rate changes, total reductions of $72,650, including $69,106 in general fund appropriations over the biennium. Motion at the top of page 114 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of adjusted reductions totaling $7.1 million, including $2.5 million general fund reduction over the 23-25 biennium to eliminate neurotherapy and biofeedback as covered Medicaid services as recommended by the governor.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Major closing issue 8 is the eligibility expansion for pregnant women. The governor, on page 114 of your closing packet, the governor recommends $37.3 million, of which $4.3 million is general fund over the 23-25 biennium to expand Medicaid eligibility for pregnant women with incomes up to 200% of the federal poverty level, including 60 days of postpartum care, beginning January 1, 2024. The table at the middle of page 114 outlines the cost and the patient split between fee-for-service and managed care. Fiscal staff notes a ramp-up period was used for these types of services to account for time needed for the expanded population to become aware of and apply for eligibility. Following the ramp-up period, the agency projects future biennial total expenditures of $53.9 million, including $20.5 million in general fund. Regarding the update following the March hearing, the fiscal staff notes postpartum services were requested to increase from 60 days to 12 months, or at least the fiscal impact of such a request was inquired about. Senate Bill 232, referred to the Senate Committee on Finance on April 17th, would expand eligibility for participants to 12 months following the end of pregnancy. The Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy submitted a fiscal note on that bill indicating the total cost over the 23-25 biennium would approximately be $14 million, including $1.4 million in general fund. Following up MAP updates, total expenditures are unchanged with a small reduction in federal funding and a small increase in general fund appropriations. The motion for this major closing issue is at the top of page 115 and asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of an adjusted $37.3 million, including $14.5 million general fund, over the 23-25 biennium to expand Medicaid eligibility to pregnant women with household incomes up to 200% of the federal poverty level.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds in this budget.
Thank you. Almost done with the Medicaid account. On page 115, the Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds includes an updated projection provided by the agency of the $15.1 million approved at the October 2022 IFC to provide for supplemental payments for nursing and assisted living facilities. The agency indicated that $12.8 million is anticipated to be expended in fiscal year 23, leaving $2.3 million remaining for expenditure in fiscal year 24. And fiscal staff recommends technical adjustments to align with these updated agency projections. The motion at the bottom of page 115 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of $2.3 million in American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds in fiscal year 24 in an expenditure category to support supplemental payments to nursing and assisted living facilities based on updated agency projections.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to our next closing issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. Moving on to other closing items within the Medicaid budget. There are 4 other closing items recommended to be closed as recommended by the governor. Fiscal staff will note other closing item number 5 includes the previous recommended adjustments relating to the transfer of administrative revenue for the private hospital provider tax. And fiscal staff recommends this other closing item be closed consistent and contingent upon approval of the major closing issue within the improved healthcare quality and access budget. The technical adjustment is noted in other closing item number 6, and fiscal staff notes other closing items 7 and 8 are recommended to be closed consistent with and contingent upon related decisions made in the intergovernmental transfer budget account. Other closing item number 9 includes all of the language as recommended by the governor for inclusion in the Appropriations Act, and generally allows the Medicaid and checkup budgets to transfer general funds between fiscal years. It allows them to transfer funds between and among general funds between and among these budgets. It also notes that the general funds appropriated in the Appropriations Act are limits, with a handful of noted exceptions that allow the agency to request supplemental payments in items A through E on page 117. Fiscal staff notes an update to item B, which would exclude additional services or populations mandated by the federal government, and notes the continuation of an exception related to prescription drug costs for fee-for-service participants. As noted, the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services is authorized to adopt state plans, which is an agreement between the State Medicaid Division and the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid about how the state administers the program. And the department is empowered to implement programmatic changes that may have a material impact. And this limitation language serves as a check on the department with limited exceptions to request and receive a supplemental appropriation. Finally, the governor recommends allowing general fund appropriations to be transferred between the administration budget as well for limited purposes. The motion at the bottom of page 118 notes that fiscal staff recommends approval of other closing items 1 through 4 as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 5, including budget amendment A 23-159-3243, consistent with and contingent upon approval of the major closing issue in the improved healthcare access, quality and access budget. Other closing item 6 with the noted technical adjustment. Other closing items 7 and 8 contingent upon approval of companion major closing issues within the intergovernmental transfer budget. And other closing item 9 as recommended by the governor, along with requesting authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I think that brings us, we can skip ahead all the way to page 127 in the closing document to begin the Nevada Checkup Program, Budget 3178.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Beginning the Nevada Checkup Program, there are 5 major closing issues. Fiscal staff notes all these major closing issues align with those previously discussed and approved in the Medicaid budget. And based on that, fiscal staff will move very quickly through the updated components, noting major closing issue number 1. Checkup caseload is projected to decrease slightly on the middle of page 128. Associated changes to the M200 and 201 decision units are noted at the bottom of page 128 and are generally decreasing relative to the governor's recommended budget. As shown, the FBAP changes along with caseload updates in the M200 and 201 decision units decreased by $1.4 million over the biennium, and in total, they decreased by $7.6 million over the biennium. The decision for the subcommittee at the top of page 129 reads, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of updated caseload projections for the Nevada Checkup Program based on March 23 caseload projections and updated federal medical assistance percentage rates, or FMAP, with net funding of $2 million, including $504,101 general fund dollars over the 23-25 biennium.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to our next closing item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal, for the record. Moving on to major closing issue 2 is provider reimbursement rate increases. Referring to the top of page 130 of your closing packet, the same recommendations included in the Medicaid budget, or 3 of the same recommendations as included and approved in the Medicaid budget, including 5% rate increases for physicians, dentists, and advanced practice registered nurses. Fiscal staff notes that although the division is not required to align coverage for services offered by checkup with Medicaid providers, it does so for consistency, and fiscal staff recommends the subcommittee approve or disapprove checkup provider rate increases consistent with its actions, including in closing the Medicaid budget.
I'm sorry. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, thought I was losing it.
The
Go ahead.
Motion would probably be helpful. We'll start there on the middle of page 130. The decision for the subcommittee asks, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of decision unit M101, including a $2.1 million decrease and a $573,324 general fund decrease over the 23-25 biennium to adjust mandatory rates, and decision units E125, 127, and E373, which is $1.3 million, $358,382 general fund over the 23-25 biennium to provide a 5% rate increase to physicians, dentists, and skilled nursing facilities.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to major closing issue number 3 is the same recommendation as recommended by the governor in the Medicaid budget related to decreases to applied behavior analysis rates. Based on the updated information provided by the agency to, again, only isolate the impact related to increasing some ABA rates. The total impact of this budget would include $3,494, of which $942 is general fund, to align rates with other states that are planning to increase, making no changes to rates planning to decrease. Consistent with the Medicaid budget, fiscal staff would recommend the approval of option B, which is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $3,494, including $942 general fund, over the 23-25 biennium to support changes to only those applied behavior analysis rates recommended to increase relative to the median rate of comparable states beginning July 2023. Under this option, no rates for ABA services would be decreased. If this option is recommended, fiscal staff recommend inclusion of back language in the Appropriation Act requiring the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services to increase rates as recommended in the Nevada Checkup budget, notwithstanding Nevada Rise Statutes, Chapter 422.
Thank you. And if this sounds like deja vu, it is. So I would entertain a motion consistent with our previous decision, going with option B.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to major closing issue number 4, again aligns with the Medicaid major closing issue for certified community behavioral health centers. After FMAP updates, fiscal staff notes this decision unit would total $294,619 or $80,129 in general fund appropriations. Again, fiscal staff recommends this decision unit to be approved consistent with the Medicaid budget. The decision at the top of page 132 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of $294,619, $80,129 in general fund over the 23-25 biennium to expand the number of CCBHC or certified community behavioral health centers from 9 to 15 beginning January 2024.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I'll turn it back over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other major closing issue number 5, again mirrors Medicaid budget. This is the elimination of neurotherapy and biofeedback services. The governor recommends budget reductions totaling $17,856 as recommended by staff following FMAP and caseload updates. This has been updated to a decrease of $17,708, including $4,830 in general fund appropriation decrease over the biennium. Fiscal staff recommends this decision unit be approved consistent with the Medicaid budget. And the decision unit at the bottom of page 132 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of reductions totaling $17,708, including $4,830 in general fund reduction over the 23-25 biennium to eliminate neurotherapy and biofeedback as covered Nevada Checkup services as recommended by the governor.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and we'll move on to the last one in this budget, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Again, aligning with the Medicaid FMAP, federal medical assistance percentage rate reductions recommended in the Medicaid budget. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed with the adjustment noted and requests authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to the next budget, the prescription drug rebate, 3245.
Thank you. Beginning on page 137 of your packet is the prescription drug rebate account. The major closing issue is the continuation of this budget. The governor recommends receipt of $416.3 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium. Fiscal staff notes no advanced projection methodology was utilized to forecast anticipated revenues, totaling over $830 million over the 23-25 biennium. As a result, noting the updates on page 138 of your closing packet, And considering the magnitude and variability of drug rebates, the subcommittee may wish to consider a letter of intent directing the agency to evaluate its methods of projecting drug rebates and associated general fund offset, as well as consideration of utilization and inflation rates applied to projected prescription drug expenditures. The motion in the middle of page 138 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of $416.3 million in prescription drug rebate revenue each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium, as recommended by the governor, and provide staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary. Additionally, the subcommittee may wish to issue a letter of intent directing the agency to submit a report to the Interim Finance Committee on an evaluation of methods for projecting drug rebate revenue, the associated general fund offset, as well as methodologies used to determine the inflation rate applied to projected prescription drug expenditures.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to move as recommended and read by staff.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to Intergovernmental Transfer Program, Budget 3157.
Thank you. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. Budget account 3157 begins on page 139 of your closing packet. The Intergovernmental Transfer Program, or IGT budget, collects funds from other governmental agencies to provide the state share for certain Medicaid expenditures, reducing the need for general fund appropriations. There's a listing and a small description of each of the supplemental and directed payment programs at the beginning. I'm going to move directly into the major closing issues, the first of which is the disproportionate share hospital payment program restructure. As recommended by the governor, including reductions to the disproportionate share hospital program of $128.4 million in reduced contributions from Clark and Washoe County, and federal Title 19 reductions of $112.4 million over the 23 biennium. This recommendation would limit revenues and funding provided by a 1 cent ad valorem tax on each $100 of assessed property value. State savings from this program is used to offset general fund appropriations within the Medicaid budget, and as currently recommended, includes general fund appropriation need totaling $59.4 million over the 23-25 biennium. As just brief background relating to the disproportionate share hospital or DSH program, it provides payments to hospitals that have a disproportionate share of uncompensated costs due to services provided to indigent and uninsured persons. Available disproportionate share hospital supplemental payments are capped for each eligible hospital based on the amount of uncompensated care provided at each facility. Due to an overall decrease of uninsured individuals in the state, the amount of disproportionate share hospital payments available to all facilities, including but not limited to University Medical Center or UMC under federal rules, has decreased. Based on existing Nevada Administrative Code, unused disproportionate share hospital program benefits from one pool are distributed to successive pool to be shared among those eligible hospitals. The description of the 5 pools, A through E, are listed at the middle of page 141. This program is primarily developed to benefit the University Medical Center, and as shown at the top of page 142, under current regulation, they would receive 87.97, nearly 90% of the total supplemental payments through this program. However, as just noted, the availability for the facility to receive supplemental payments has decreased as their uncompensated care has also decreased. This results in significant redistributions of funding originally allotted to Pool A to Pool B, which are private hospitals in Clark County or in counties greater than 700,000. Fiscal staff notes at the bottom of page 142, the agency indicated recoupments in the last 2 audited fiscal years included $34.4 million and $30.5 million respectively that was required to be repaid by University Medical Center for redistribution to Pool B. 2 other updates requested and mentioned in the hearing on March 2nd included reduced payments to UMC and recoupments. Recoupments were just mentioned, and the table in the middle of page, towards the bottom of page 142, includes the projected and current supplemental and directed payments to University Medical Center through other supplemental payment programs. Fiscal staff notes the MCO directed payment program includes a significant contribution increase in fiscal year 23 as projected by the agency. At the top of page 143, fiscal staff also notes that absent changes recommended by the governor, disproportionate share payments would decrease beginning in October 23 by an isolated projected $16.9 million in '24 and $35.7 million in fiscal year '24. FMAP updates were compiled as provided by the agency and presented in the table at the bottom of page 143, showing minor changes to total payments and contributions. The decision for the subcommittee at the middle of page 143 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of changes to the disproportionate share hospital supplemental payment program to reduce county revenue by $129.5 million and increase general fund appropriations by $59.1 million in the Medicaid budget over the 23-25 biennium as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I think that brings us to closing item number 2 within this budget.
Absolutely correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. Major closing issue number 2 begins on page 143 and continues on to page 144 of your packet. The governor recommends decreasing intergovernmental transfer revenue by $3.7 million and increasing general fund appropriations by the same amount in the Medicaid budget over the 23-25 biennium to increase the amount of FMAP claiming received by Clark County from 60% to 87.5%. The amount of federal revenue received is calculated for supplemental payment programs is calculated prospectively based on the standard FMAP rate. As newly eligible recipients and participants have an FMAP rate of 90%, the FMAP claiming process toward the end of the calendar fiscal year recoups or reclaims some of this additional federal funding that was not initially claimed. According to the agency, Clark County proposed an increase to the share of this FMAP claiming revenue received by the county over the following biennium from 60 to 87%. And as previously noted, increases to the share of FMAP claiming provided to Clark County would result in additional general fund appropriations required in the Medicaid budget to offset the loss of state net benefit. As updated and as noted at the bottom of page 144 in your packet, these total recommendations would equal $3.7 million in decreased intergovernmental transfer funds from Clark County and matching increases to general fund appropriations in the Medicaid budget to offset the decrease in state net benefit. The motion at the bottom of page 144 asks if the subcommittee wishes to increase the amount of federal medical assistance percentage claiming credit provided to Clark County from 60 to 87.5%, resulting in decreased intergovernmental transfer revenue received from Clark County, totaling $3.6 million, including the technical adjustments noted, over the 23 to 25 biennium. Approval of this decision unit requires the approval of a companion decision unit in the Medicaid budget, which increases general fund appropriations by $3.6 million over the following biennium.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to the last other closing items in this budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. There are 10 other closing items in this budget. Fiscal staff will just note technical adjustments are requested in other closing item 1 and 2. The remaining closing items indicate the total is recommended by the governor and adjusted for the other supplemental and directed payment programs in the IGT account, along with the reserve balances in other closing item 9. And fiscal staff notes that all state net benefit associated with the 21-23 biennium will be utilized to offset general funds within the Medicaid budget in fiscal year 23 and will not be carried forward to the ensuing biennium. And also FMAP updates in other closing item number 10. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed with the noted technical adjustments, including updated FMAP rates, other closing items 2 through 10, as recommended by the governor with the noted technical adjustments, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to 3177, improve healthcare quality and access. And go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. Exactly right. Beginning on page 149 of your packet is budget account 3177, the newly recommended improve healthcare quality and access budget. The governor recommends $572.3 million over the following biennium in private hospital provider tax revenue to implement a private hospital supplemental payment program within the newly requested budget. Fiscal staff notes Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 422 inclusive allows for the establishment of a provider tax on operators of medical facilities to fund supplemental payments. The operators must be polled, and 2/3 of the group must consent to the assessment. Revenue may only be used to provide supplemental payments to eligible operators and for associated administration. As recommended by the governor, the private hospital provider tax program would consist of multiple payment programs as outlined in the table at the top of page 150, including several upper payment limit programs related to fee-for-service, as well as directed payment programs related to the managed care program. The top of page 151, there's a brief outline of the timeline and the components required prior to the implementation of this program, as noted, including but not limited to the polling and consent of 67% of providers within groups. I think the easiest way to discuss this issue includes the update section on page 152, as there was a budget amendment and a number of technical adjustments that have been recommended for this budget. So I'm going to move over to page 152 on the updates. During and following the March 2nd, 2023 hearing, the agency indicated the goals of the private hospital provider tax program include generating supplemental and directed payments to private hospitals, holding rural hospitals harmless who are not assessed, while generating sufficient administrative revenue to pay associated increased premium taxes, administer the program, and fund expanded services. According to the agency, there's a federal prohibition against provider tax programs designed to hold assessed providers harmless. Per federal regulation, provider tax payments must, among other things, be redistributive in nature. There has to be some winners and losers. The combination of a voluntary program and a statutory restriction limiting the use of funds to administrative expenditures and payments to assessed providers would, according to the agency, not align with federal requirements. The Governor's Finance Office submitted a related budget implementation bill, Senate Bill 435, passed out of Senate Committee on Health and Human Services on April 14th and currently in Senate Finance, that would amend sections of NRS Chapter 422 to include supplemental and directed payments to non-assessed providers as allowable sources of this revenue, which would allow public hospitals not assessed to receive a benefit from the program if so approved by the polled operators. Additionally, and included in the adopted amendment, a maximum of 15% of the total provider hospital tax revenue would be used to administer the program, related administrative components, and to expand Medicaid behavioral health services to improve rates or expand services. According to testimony provided at the April 14th Senate HHS hearing, allowing private hospital provider tax revenue to be used for payments to non-assessed providers, as well as other Medicaid services, may satisfy the federal requirement that payments be generally redistributive in nature. Fiscal staff notes there is a significant premium tax associated with this that would also be paid out of the Medicaid out of the administrative review in this budget account. Budget Amendment 23-151-3177 was submitted on March 7th. Recommends adjustments to the revenues and expenditures to reflect a January 1 start date as opposed to the previous either July or October implementation date. The revenue figures in this submitted budget amendment appear reasonable. However, the submitted budget amendment was out of balance related to the administrative reserve, and fiscal staff recommends technical adjustments to align the administrative reserve with the other components of this budget. Also, as previously noted, to align the amount of administrative revenue transferred from the 3177 account to the Medicaid administration account. As a result of this, fiscal staff recommends taking no action on budget amendment 823-151-3177. The table at the top of page 153 is perhaps the most straightforward way to review this decision unit. The as recommended and as adjusted, total private hospital provider tax revenue received in this budget would total $572.3 million. This would result in transfers to Medicaid totaling approximately $405 million to be used as the state share for supplemental and directed payments to hospital providers. It includes $886,000 in transfers to Medicaid to cover administrative activities, as well as $113 million in the administrative reserve to cover the components previously noted, including potential up to 15% for enhancements and expanded rates to behavioral health services, and a $162 million program reserve, which is largely the component of a timing issue. Taxes will be received throughout the year, but supplemental payments are required to be made, so this would allow the agency to keep the budget solvent. All of this would allow for total supplemental and directed payments paid out of the Medicaid budget to total $1.059 billion over the biennium. At this time, the impact to state net benefit associated with other upper payment limit programs isn't known. However, the limitation language noted in the Appropriations Act previously would prohibit the agency from requesting a supplemental in the event general fund shortfall due to reductions in state net benefit to other UPL programs. Finally, based on the developing nature of the private hospital provider tax program, the subcommittee may wish to consider the issuance of a letter of intent directing the agency to provide reports to the Interim Finance Committee on a semi-annual basis detailing the implementation status of this program. The decision at the bottom of page 153 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of a private hospital provider tax program and budget over the 2023 to 25 biennium, including private hospital provider tax revenue of $572.3 million, transfers to the Medicaid budget to fund the non-federal share of supplemental and directed payments totaling $405.4 million, transfers to the Medicaid administration budget to fund administrative activities totaling $886,272. $886,272, administrative reserves totaling $113.2 million, and program reserves totaling $162.2 million, contingent upon passage and approval of Senate Bill 435 or other enabling legislation, with authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Additionally, does the subcommittee wish to recommend the issuance of a letter of intent directing the agency to submit semi-annual reports to the Interim Finance Committee detailing the implementation status of the program, the amount of private hospital provider tax assessed and collected, and total supplemental and directed payments made to each hospital entity?
Whew, that was a lot. I think we have some questions and comments. So I'll first start with Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question on the holdback. The holdback proposed, I believe it said you said up to 15%. I don't know what the holdback has been traditionally, but I wanted to find out in the past how much that has been. And then also if that holdback is on the entire little over $1 billion or just on the amount of money, the non-federal share. Thank you.
I think I can answer some of that. We've never done this before, so this would be our first, but I think staff can provide some more details. It's my understanding that with that 15% administrative holdback that we would receive back, that's needed to be approved so we can get that money back as a part of the process, but I'll let fiscal staff further elaborate on it.
Chair Nguyen, you're absolutely right. John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. That's correct. This is a new program as recommended by the governor and as adjusted. So there isn't historical precedent to lean on for this. However, Madam Chair is correct that according to the agency, these components, including the 15% holdback to make supplemental payments both to non-assessed providers as well as to fund either enhanced rates or expanded Medicaid services, would potentially allow this program to be approved by the feds and would pass CMS muster relating to the general redistributive requirement. And I'm sorry, if you could repeat the second part of your question.
So thank you. I know that this program is new, but we have programs that are similar where there's holdbacks, and I don't know if we have numbers on that. I just want to make sure we leave as many dollars as possible into the pool to provide access to care in the state. The other question was, is the 15% on the $1.059 billion, or is it on the non-federal share as far as holdback? I'm assuming it's on the entire pool of funds.
Thank you, Senator, for the clarification. John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. The current 15% withhold is based on the total amount of private hospital provider tax, so it's not the total supplemental payments coming out, it's the revenue coming in. And to briefly address your prior comment, the next budget, Increased Quality of Nursing Care Budget Account 3160, is a similar program in that it's a mandatory provider tax on nursing facilities. There's a $900,000 reserve in this account, and there's also the allowability for a 1% administrative withhold on this, but currently, as recommended and as previously approved, the 3160 account does not have additional withholds to fund other services outside of the supplemental payments provided in this budget account.
Thank you, and I appreciate that information. I think we just need to keep that in mind, because when you start looking at 15% of $405 million, it's $60 million. I don't know that we need that to run the program. I mean, we want to make sure we can keep as many dollars as possible in the pool for access to care. And I do remember you said up to 15%. So I guess the last question would be, do we have a number or percentage that we anticipate, at least for the start of this program, as far as the withhold?
You know what? I see Miss Weeks, and I'm going to put her on the spot and see if she'll come up and answer some of these questions, because it's not just a $60 million that would go to fund. I think it's a little over $1 million in admin, like, costs, but there's some other issues, and I think she can do that. So
That would be
sorry to put you
helpful.
on the spot, Miss Weeks, but I know you have the answers to this.
Thank you,
so-
Chair.
Madam Chair, through you to Senator Gansert, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. You're right, correct. 1% for our current skilled nursing facility program. I would note for this particular program, it does have an impact on our premium tax in the state, which we in Medicaid pay the state share of. So by increasing managed care payments for this hospital payment program, it's over $20 million to our program. So we need funding for that. We also expect in the first year, because of CMS's recent guidance, that we're going to need to be doing additional auditing of hospitals. So we're going to need additional auditing staff. I think in the first 2 years, we anticipate $3 to $4 million in increased staffing and technology for this new program. And then after that, it would go down. I would note Senate Bill 435, I hope I'm getting the number right this morning, is a governor's finance office bill, which includes the 15%. It includes provisions in there that note that if there's remaining funds from the administrative costs that we've taken in the 15%, that we can use those funds to pay for some of the Department of Justice findings for behavioral health care for children and adults in the state. And that funding also goes to help hospitals. It offsets some of the issues hospitals are seeing with a lot of psych patients with behavioral health needs that are stuck in the inpatient setting. So we're using some of this funding to support those efforts as well.
Thank you for that information. When I added that up, that's about 6 or 7%. So that overflow, if we do have some, those sound like good uses. If we need to do that, thank you.
Thank you.
See, I knew she would have all the answers. Wonderful. Any further discussion or questions regarding this? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to 3160, increased quality of nursing care.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. The increased quality of nursing care budget, 3160, requires the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy to establish a provider tax program encompassing all freestanding long-term care facilities. There's a waiver that waives the uniform requirements, and there's currently a split rate assessed to Medicaid providers who have more or less than a 65% occupancy. There are no major closing issues within this budget. The other closing item notes the nursing facility provider tax supplemental payments and includes updated federal medical assistance percentage rates. Fiscal staff notes the provider tax revenue of $43.1 million in '24 and $43.6 million in '25 is projected. The provider tax revenue would support supplemental payments totaling $112.9 million in '24 and $110 million in fiscal year '25. This is the last, I believe, alternative motion, and Madam Chair, I'm happy to explain this one and run through it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. The alternative motion, as recommended for inclusion by the chair, would include the addition of $9.3 million in increased federal share to this budget, largely based on a review of the federal medical assistance percentage, or FMAP rate, that's applied to this program to draw down federal funds. According to the agency, there is an opportunity to review the current FMAP rate, which is right around 60% for reimbursement, to include the newly eligible population, which is reimbursed at a 90-10. And as it is, there is a significant component of newly eligible 90-10 individuals in nursing homes, which would allow the state to draw down additional federal funds for redistribution, either in the form of increased supplemental payments, reduced provider tax, and or an increase to the daily rate for these provider types just through the standard Medicaid reimbursement process. The alternative motion would read, the subcommittee may wish to recommend approval of $86.7 million in provider tax revenue to support $222.9 million in supplemental payments to nursing facilities over the 23-25 biennium, as recommended by the governor, and provide staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary. Additionally, the subcommittee may wish to recommend approval to the full committee to direct the agency to seek federal approval if necessary to adjust the FMAP rate associated with the nursing facility provider tax to account for these for those in the newly eligible population and to include $9.3 million in increased federal share in the budget to support nursing facility providers in each year of the 2023 biennium, with authority for fiscal staff to make corresponding technical adjustments to the Medicaid budget. Additionally, I move to recommend issuing a letter of intent directing the agency to provide a status report to the Interim Finance Committee by August 1, 2024, detailing the progress made increasing the associated FMAP rate and nursing facility provider net benefit.
Thank you, and thank you for, I want to thank staff for, and the agency for helping come up with creative ideas and ways to further draw down some of that federal money and give kind of a needed increase to reimbursement rates for our nursing facility providers. So in addition, I had mentioned this before when we were talking about the 10% increase for nursing facility providers, that rate increase. This would potentially amount to an additional 5% raise as well. So with that, if anyone has any further questions regarding this alternative recommendation, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to move this alternative recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and that leads us to indigent hospital care 3244.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last budget for the subcommittee's consideration today is Budget Account 3260. The Upper Payment Limit, or UPL, holding account was authorized for the 21-23 biennium through the passage of the prior Appropriations Act. The Governor recommends continuing the UPL holding account in the 23-25 biennium, funded with transfers from budgets within the Department of Health and Human Services, totaling $10.4 million in each year of the biennium. I'm going to move quickly to updates at the bottom of page 122. After adjustments, including FMAP updates, transfers to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy are projected to total $7.9 million in '24 and $8.2 million in fiscal year '25. General fund reversions are projected to equal $1.6 million in '24 and $1.4 million in '25. And finally, Healthy Nevada fund reversions are projected to total $930,522 in fiscal year '24 and $816,718 in fiscal year 2025. The decision for the subcommittee at the bottom of page 162 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of continuing the UPL holding account in the 23-25 biennium to support Medicaid supplemental payments as recommended by the governor with the noted technical adjustments.
Any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. It carries, motion carries, and that's okay. 1 second. Oh, I'm going to backtrack. I think we skipped a necessary motion, and we mixed up two budgets. So, how should I do this? Should I unwind this? I'm going to unwind this. So, courts, 1 second. Okay, we jumped ahead. We got too excited. So we are moving to budget 3244, the indigent hospital care budget. So if I can have fiscal staff talk about that, I know he is very excited to move on and be done with this. So we will just back up a little bit, and we will I'll turn it over to you to go over this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the catch. The indigent hospital budget is budget account 3244, begins on page 157 of your closing packet. This includes a governor recommended transfer of $95.6 million to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy to support the state share of the Medicaid Indigent Accident Fund upper payment limit, $52.4 million, and support for a portion of county's responsibility to pay the non-federal share of Medicaid expenditures for certain indigent individuals. Following, including the follow-up information following the March 2nd hearing, the middle of page 159, the Board of Trustees for the Fund for Hospital Care has not met in calendar year 23, but the revenue and expenditure figures as recommended by the governor would be recommended for approval at the next meeting of the Board of Trustees. As a result, no technical adjustments are recommended. The motion in the middle of page 159 asks if the subcommittee wishes to recommend approval of funding and expenditures totaling $146.3 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, including support for the state share of Medicaid Indigent Accident Fund upper payment limit supplemental payment program, including $52.4 million, and support for a portion of county's responsibility to pay the non-federal share of Medicaid expenditures for certain indigent individuals, totaling $41 million, and provide staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Do we have any questions regarding this budget in this presentation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. And since we already moved on to UPL holding account 3260, I believe that was what we had previously presented on. We missed the technical adjustment. Never mind. Still backing up. I got too excited again. So I will turn it back over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The major closing issue was previously approved at the bottom of page 162. So moving on to the other closing item at the top of page 163. Fiscal staff, first, the other closing item is the renewal of statutory authority for the UPL holding account. The agency did request updated language, slightly different from what was recommended by the governor, that includes clarification relating to balance forward revenue, which appears reasonable to fiscal staff. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed as recommended by the governor, with the noted changes, and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Any questions regarding that? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. Motion carries. And that brings us to the very end of those budget closings, but if I could just take a moment to thank all of this fiscal staff that is not only here in the room, but I know there is a lot of fiscal staff that are continuing to watch this to make sure everything goes smoothly and I don't mess it up too bad like I did there at the end. So I just want to, if we can give them all a big round of applause, just because they're amazing. And that brings us to our last agenda item, which is public comment. I would remind everyone to limit your testimony to 2 minutes for public comment. And if you can please clearly state your name and spell it for the record, that would be greatly appreciated. So if we can fill in the table here in Carson City if you wish to provide public comment. And I don't see anyone in Las Vegas, but if there is some people in Las Vegas that would like to provide public comment, please come up to that table and begin when you're ready here in Carson City.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mary Przinski, here representing SNAP, the State of Nevada Association of Providers. SNAP members provide services to about 80% of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities here in the state. And SNAP wants to thank the governor for his recommendations in his budget, and we want to thank you, committee members, that worked so hard, such hard work this morning. We'd also like to thank the Division of Health and Human Services, headed by Richard Whitley, and want to thank Dina Schmidt, the administrator who works with our group, for all your work. Where would our people in Nevada be who have so many disabilities without everyone working together? So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other people to testify in public comment? Oh, I see. Either getting up to leave and run out. Go ahead and begin when you're ready. If I can remind you to state your name and spell it for the record.
Good morning, Senate and Assembly Joint Subcommittee on Health and Human Services. My name is Amy Henley. It's Amyhenley. I'm an RN of over 40 years with my background in all pediatrics, neonatal ICU, peds ICU, and very privileged for the last 8 years to be involved with neurorestorative for kids both in Southern Nevada and Reno. I serve as the clinical program specialist, and I'm pretty passionate about quality care for children in our state. I want to thank you for your support for pediatric skilled nursing facilities that provide the essential care to Nevada's most vulnerable children. At this time, I'd like to just take a moment to share how our exclusive pediatric skilled nursing program differentiates from a traditional SNF. Our facilities take care of medically complex and fragile children in a safe, non-institutional, more home-like setting, specifically focusing on their high medical needs, emotional, developmental, educational, and social well-being. Their medical fragility, of course, complicates much of this. My colleague will spend some time talking about specifics on that. We do work in partnership with all of our acute care facilities, including our community medical and nursing providers, DCFS, schools, and families to support this patient population here in Nevada. Without our facilities, however, these children could, and sometimes do, when we're at capacity, remain in the acute care hospitals in their NICUs and PICUs that have enormous daily rates of $1,800 to $2,000 a day. Providing care in our environment with our individualized experience in all areas of their care positively impacts our state's children and families in a far more cost-effective manner than remaining in acute care settings, or even worse, being sent out of state, which disrupts our families that we strive to support by caring for them here in our state. Thank you again for your support, and we are grateful to be included in this 10% increase. We have exactly 120 beds throughout Nevada and make up the majority of the share of these markets as neurorestorative. Your support with the rate increase will help ensure that we can continue to provide these critical services in the pediatric patients in an unpredictable and increasingly expensive post-pandemic healthcare landscape that's suffering with staffing shortages, supply chain shortages, and major shortages with technologies and medication. So we appreciate that.
Good morning, Subcommittee on Human Health and Human Services. I'm Dr. Sean Rolls. I'm a pediatrician, so when I tell kids how to say my name, I say it's like cinnamon rolls, but it's just spelled R-O-W-L-E-S. I'm a proud Nevadan. I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I went to Las Vegas High School. I went to UNLV in my undergrad. I went to UNR for medical school. I did my pediatric residency in Las Vegas, and I continue to practice in Las Vegas as a pediatrician. I'm the medical director for neurorestorative for kids. We take care of over 50 kids out of 2 different buildings. We take care of kids from as young as 2 weeks of age all the way up to age 21. What makes us different a little bit from adult skilled nursing facilities is the scope and breadth of the patients that we take care of. We take care of kids that can walk and talk, to those that are devastated and are immobile. We take care of kids that basically breathe on their own, to those that are on ventilators and have breathing tubes. We take care of kids basically for short term, those that need short rehab or need IV antibiotics for complicated infections, to those that have been there for years. We take care of kids that have family members that visit on a daily basis, and we take care of kids that have been devastated through child abuse and who don't have a family, and so we become their family. One example I think is a good one is I took care of a kid when I was a resident at UMC Children's Hospital. He was a newborn. He had complications afterwards where most of his intestines had to be removed, which left him having absorptive problems, and he has to have IV nutrition. He was discharged home, but he became too complicated for mom to manage at home, and at that time there was no pediatric skilled nursing facility. So he was sent to Arizona, and once we got our program up and running, we were able to repatriate him as well as some other patients from Arizona so that their family could be here and visit with him. He's now 15. I've been taking care of him now 6 years at neurorestorative. He also has autism, so he has to have a one-to-one sitter because otherwise he'll pull out his feeding tube or he'll pull out his central line, which allows him to get his nutrition. He goes to school at our facility through Homebound, which is helpful. He's going to graduate 8th grade, and we're really happy that we're going to be able to take him to graduation. Without the additional help and the resources that you guys are helping provide, we won't be able to give the care that we can to him. So we really appreciate all the support that you guys have done through this committee and also the additional increase that the governor is proposing. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. I wanted to just comment on two items. One is the ABA rates. They're so critical for our kids and for kids in foster care. And like Senator Gansert said, there's been a lot of work done on that, and I'm glad that we didn't take a step back this session and we kept moving that forward. And then also, I was a CAP attorney for about 5 years, and at one point I had 4 kids at Neurorestorative for Kids. So when we think about what they're doing, it's not just it's our foster kids that get placed there when they have complicated medical needs. And one of the kids I had was on he wasn't able to move. He could squeeze your hand and he could move his eyes, and he was on a feeding tube and a ventilator. And the work that they did every day for him to make his life as good as possible. And then when we were able to get him back with his father, who hadn't known he existed, their team was critical in helping transport him to Florida, and just did amazing work. So I'm really happy that there's a rate increase so that they can keep doing the work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in public comment? Seeing no one coming up to the table, Broadcast Services, do we have anyone on the lines?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Chair and the committee members. This is Dora Martinez. I represent the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. My members would like to thank you for increasing and maintaining the services for people with disability and elderly folks. I wasn't planning on calling, but I heard all the stories and all the increments. I want to thank you all. Also, I'm trying to search. As a blind person, when the weather is bad, I can't take the public transit with my dog. So we take the paratransit, which is a door-to-door service. And lately, we've been on the same bus with an individual who is in a group home. He has IDD, individual with developmental disability, and he's been wearing the same clothes for the last 5 days. And I can't see, but I do smell, and he doesn't smell so good. And I was wondering if there's people that just drop in on these group homes for these for people with IDD and just check up on them. Some of the providers, some of the drivers who goes to door come and they are upset. They don't want to lose their job, so they don't report it in. But they tell me that these kids have been wearing the same clothes for the last 7 days. They don't bathe them. They go in, they knock on the door. The person who takes care of them sits on the couch and watch TV, and he's not fed. So when he comes on board, the young man or woman is hungry. So I just wish that there are people that oversee those places and make sure that the basic hygiene are taken care of, because they don't brush their teeth, they don't bathe them. So I just thought I'll be their voices, and thank you for all you do, and God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers in public comment online or on the phones?
Yes, we have one remaining.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Molly Halligan. I'm calling on behalf of the Nevada Association for Behavior Analysis. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all committee members for working so hard to figure out how to protect the ABA rates. We have, as a collective, for many, countless people have been working on this for the better part of 2 decades to ensure that we can increase access to services in Nevada. We do have a lot of work left to do, but this rate increase, or the commensurate rate, will significantly help that. So thank you very much for all of your work.
That concludes all callers for public comment.
Thank you. At this time, I will close public comment, and I think we have some comments from committee members, so I'll turn it over to Senator Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank the staff for their hard work, but I also want to thank the nurses because I believe this is National Nurses Week. And so thank you to all the nurses out there that help all these vulnerable and sick patients. And we applaud you as well. Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members? We do. We have Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be remiss if I let this meeting end without saying thank you. This has been a team effort. I want to say thank you to both of our subcommittee chairs, to our amazing fiscal staff, and the leadership team. There's been many, many hours put into these closing items, from in-person meetings, emails, text messages, telephone calls with the stakeholders and the division to address the needs of some of our most vulnerable Nevadans, and do it in the most fiscally responsible way. So I just wanted to say thank you to all involved, because this was definitely a team effort to get here today.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just take a personal note. It has been a pleasure to work alongside with Assemblywoman Gorlow chairing this subcommittee. And, sometimes it's days like today where you realize we do some great things. So hopefully we can take that momentum and continue it on to other subcommittees and on to the full committees as we approve this budget and move forward. So with that, I will conclude this subcommittee hearing today and adjourn.
Waste members, please don't go too far.